Chapter 3033. Yi Shiwen's sword broke through the Shura, Holy Emperor's attack. It almost split the sky into two halves. The terrifying wave set off even shocked the Shura, Holy Emperor. He retreated again and again, barely dodging Yi Shiwen's attack. Damn it! The Shura, Holy Emperor's expression was very ugly. In just a short time, the strength that Yi Shiwen displayed was like a different person. His strength had increased crazily. Impossible. How can your recovery speed compare to the power that I obtained from the sacrifice? He couldn't believe it, but he didn't have time to think about it. He only had one thought left in his mind, which was to delay enough time until the other experts of heavenly Taoism arrived. Otherwise, today might be the day he, who had been unstoppable for countless years, would die. At the same time, countless fist talismans appeared behind him. At this moment, they completely condensed together and formed a vibrating cut. They formed a sharp talisman that wanted to crush everything. At this moment, his power had truly been raised to the limit. In fact, he had already soared to the combat power that only a second-realm cultivator could possess. This sacrificial secret technique was indeed powerful. It could allow even Imperial Lords to possess combat power that surpassed their limits. I don't believe that you can withstand such an attack. The Shura, Holy Emperor, roared and punched out with his fist. It was wrapped in countless fist talismans and formed a monstrous wave. Yi Shiwen's expression didn't change. He directly slapped down with one hand and turned it into a seal. In an instant, this seal seemed to have formed the momentum of a martial emperor descending in all directions, suppressing all directions. All martial arts were under his control at this moment. All the power was disintegrated in the face of this terrifying seal. Yi Shiwen used the seal technique of the martial emperor seal to fight the Shura Holy Emperor. The strength of both sides had risen to the peak. Rumble! Yi Shiwen's martial emperor's seal directly bombarded the Shura Holy Emperor's fist. The Shura Holy Emperor let out a blood-curdling screech. Another arm was directly crippled by the martial emperor's seal. It turned into a mass of blood mist and scattered in all directions. The Shura Holy Emperor's all-out attack could barely raise his strength to the second realm. However, the strength that Yi Shiwen had recovered had already allowed him to stand firmly in the second realm. He had far surpassed the level that the Shura Holy Emperor had recovered. Shura Holy Emperor roared. He gritted his teeth, endured the pain, and punched again. He didn't give Yi Shiwen a chance to catch his breath. His heart was already in turmoil. Judging from the fact that Yi Shiwen could easily restore his strength to the second realm, he must not be at the peak of the second realm. This made him even more desperate. He absolutely couldn't let Yi Shiwen restore his strength easily. This was the only thought in his mind. His eyes suddenly opened, and there seemed to be infinite power suddenly appearing in them, shooting out astonishing divine light. He pointed at the spring of nirvana and suddenly punched out with his remaining two fists. Heaven and earth were reversed, collapsing together. Do you think I don't know what you're thinking? Waiting for your reinforcements to arrive? I think you're thinking too much. Yi Shiwen could see through people's minds. This little trick naturally couldn't escape his observation. If he wanted to wait for reinforcements to arrive, the premise was that the Shura Holy Emperor could stop him. Yi Shiwen slashed down with the Taiyu sword in his hand. Clang! There was a huge roar, like the sound of metal colliding. The Taiyu sword slammed into the Shura Holy Emperor's fist. Originally, the fist that had been sacrificed had no problem going head-on against the Dao tool. However, at this time, after this shocking collision, cracks appeared on the Shura Holy Emperor's fist. Many cracks began to spread in all directions like a spider web. Then, more and more cracks appeared. Finally, after a loud bang, the two fists instantly exploded into countless fragments. Each fragment scattered in all directions. After the sword destroyed the Shura Holy Emperor's two arms, the Shura Holy Emperor finally realized how powerful he was. Even under the state of sacrificing himself, there was still a huge gap between his strength and Yi Shiwen's. Most importantly, his strength had climbed to the peak, while Yi Shiwen's was just the beginning. Let's go! At this time, The Shura, Holy Emperor, retreated again and again. He didn't dare to fight Yi Shiwen head-on. He already had the intention to retreat. Shura, Holy Emperor, didn't you want to take me to see your sect master? Why are you running away now? Yi Shiwen's voice was indifferent. He also absorbed the flesh and blood of the Shura, Holy Emperor, in the sky to speed up his recovery. Unfortunately, the Shura, Holy Emperor's realm was far lower than his. Although the Shura, Holy Emperor's flesh and blood had some effect, it could only speed up Yi Shiwen's recovery. It couldn't immediately restore Yi Shiwen to the peak. Moreover, the Shura, Holy Emperor's flesh and blood had been sacrificed. The remaining energy in the flesh and blood had been burned. The Shura, Holy Emperor, almost spat out blood. He had seen bullies before, but he had never seen someone bully like this. However, this wasn't the time to care about this. All of his arms had been destroyed, and his upper body was bare. He looked extremely bleak. He stepped on a blood-red rainbow and fled in the direction of the Heavenly Tao sect. How could Yi Shiwen give him this opportunity? His strength was improving, and his strength was recovering. The power of the curse inside his body was no longer able to cause a fundamental impact on him. He could now transfer more of his martial power to fight instead of using it to suppress the power of the curse. Yi Shiwen chased after him. Every step he took seemed to cross a world. Although the Shura, Holy Emperor's speed was very fast, and his speed had risen to the peak under the state of sacrifice, it was nothing in front of Yi Shiwen. However, he was caught in a flash. You're going too far. I'll fight you. The Shura, Holy Emperor, was forced into a desperate situation by Yi Shiwen. All of the power in his body was stimulated at once. It formed a giant energy hand out of thin air. 6 fists blasted towards Yi Shiwen. He had exhausted all of his strength. Yi Shiwen stood in the sky with a dignified appearance. He was like the most ancient god in the world, ruling everything between heaven and earth. He was the center of the universe. He was the center of the world. Dominate the world. Yi Shiwen's expression was indifferent. He slashed down with his sword. The power that had been restored to the second realm suddenly blasted out. Rumble! The Shura, Holy Emperor's 6 condensed arms exploded in an instant. Then, the sword light blasted into the Shura, Holy Emperor's body, causing a shocking explosion. Boom! 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 Yi Shiwen's sword energy violently exploded inside the Shura, Holy Emperor's body. He screamed again and again, and retreated again and again. Blood and bone fragments flew everywhere, and his body was dripping with blood. He had been seriously injured by Yi Shiwen's sword. The sacrificial state was useless to the Shura, Holy Emperor. He thought that it would be a blessing, but it didn't have much effect. He couldn't suppress Yi Shiwen's sword chi that was rampaging in his body. At this time, his last bit of fighting spirit had been destroyed by Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen wasn't someone he could fight. Yi Shiwen, my heavenly Taoism won't let you go. I won't let you go either. The Shura, Holy Emperor, roared as he fled into the distance. He was infuriated by Yi Shiwen. Won't let me go? I don't think you have the chance. Yi Shiwen sneered. His figure flickered, and he caught up with the Shura, Holy Emperor. He slashed down with the Tai-Yu sword in his hand. Bang! The Shura, Holy Emperor, was hit again. The Taoist robe on his body fell apart. The continuous battles, especially with such terrifying intensity, had already caused his Taoist robe to be full of cracks. Yi Shiwen's attack completely tore his Taoist robe apart. Without the protection of the Taoist robe, his body also fell apart on the spot. The Shura, Holy Emperor's split body tried to recover again, but Yi Shiwen didn't give him the chance. He slashed down with his body and spirit, turning them into nothingness in an instant. The Shura, Holy Emperor, is dead. Everyone's eyes widened. It was as if they couldn't breathe and were suffocating. Even in the Fortune Divine dynasty, an Emperor Realm Master was still a high and mighty master. The fall of any Emperor Realm Master would cause endless turbulence, and many people would be affected. Moreover, they had witnessed the death of an Emperor Lord in front of them. It was like a dream. This Yi Shiwen is really too fierce. Even the craziest person hadn't thought that this would be the result. At most, Yi Shiwen would defeat the Shura, Holy Emperor, and escape. Such a result was already very shocking. But the truth was that the result was even crazier than they had expected. The heavenly Taoism had suffered heavy losses in the Battle of the Celestial Pole Island. Not only had they lost hundreds of quasi-emperors and disciples like Bai Daozi, who had a high chance of entering the Emperor Lord realm, but they had also lost an Emperor Lord. It was completely imaginable what kind of uproar this news would set off when it reached the heavenly Taoism. Fairy Tian Miao, who hadn't left yet, was even more dumbfounded. She knew very well that even if she could enter the Emperor Lord realm one day, it would still take a very long time to compete with a person like the Shura Holy Emperor. But Yi Shiwen was actually able to beat the Shura Holy Emperor. From this, she could see some things. This made her feel even more regretful that she hadn't been able to pull Yi Shiwen into the Nine Nether Holy Cult. After Yi Shiwen killed the Shura Holy Emperor, he took the Shura Holy Emperor away. It would also help him recover. Then, he left without looking back. He knew that the heavenly Taoism's revenge would arrive soon. Before that, he had to be prepared. Chapter 30-34 Eastern Domain. Astral Star Sect was located at the border of the Eastern Domain. Although it could only be considered as a second-rate sect, it was backed by a super sect, the Astral Star Sect, which allowed the Astral Star Sect to have many experts. However, because it was located at the border of the Eastern Domain, although it was separated by the Endless Sea region, it had many conflicts with the Outer Domain. Therefore, it was different from the sects of the Inner Domain. Every few decades, the Astral Star Sect would open its mountain gate to recruit disciples to make up for the disciples who died in the conflicts with the Outer Domain. Each mountain gate of the Astral Star Sect was like a star. When the entire mountain gate's encampment was combined, it was like a boundless star field. This was an astonishing great array used to attract the power of the stars in the sky, allowing the disciples of the Astral Star Sect to cultivate with twice the results with half the effort. Because the cultivation method of the Astral Star Sect was mostly related to the power of the stars, the cultivation speed would be tremendous within this array. This also reflected the difference between the Astral Star Sect and the ordinary sections. After all, they had the backing of a great sect, and all kinds of arrangements were very extraordinary. On the stone steps that extended down from the mountain gate, a young man was kneeling on the stone steps, motionless. It was as if nothing in this world could move him. This Sun Ziwang is still kneeling. The disciples of the Astral Star Sect constantly passed by. When they saw the young girl kneeling there, they couldn't help but not know whether to laugh or cry. Really, it seems like he has been kneeling here for 10 years. It has indeed been 10 years. He is really persistent. Does he really believe that there is a powerful senior here? How is that possible? Even the sect master personally came to investigate. There is no such thing as a senior. He must have seen a ghost. Many people had already heard of this matter. Even if it wasn't originally news, it became big news after Sun Ziwang kneeled for 10 years. It was said that 10 years ago, Sun Ziwang had inadvertently seen a very powerful big shot and insisted on kneeling here to beg that big shot to become his disciple. He had been kneeling for 10 years. However, during these 10 years, no one had appeared. Even the sect master of the Astral Star Sect was alarmed by this matter and had personally come to take a look. However, in fact, he hadn't seen the big shot that Sun Ziwang had mentioned. Therefore, Sun Ziwang quickly became a laughingstock. He became the target of ridicule for countless people and became thoroughly famous in the Constellation sect. Everyone felt that this was his fantasy. How could there be any formidable senior? This was the Astral Sect. Although the Astral Sect wasn't considered a big sect, it had the backing of a colossus like the Astral Sect. Even an emperor monarch wouldn't act recklessly here. Alas, he is really pitiful. It is said that his family members were all killed in the last invasion of the foreign domain. He joined our Astral Sect in order to take revenge. But it's useless. It's impossible for him to take revenge. It's said that the one who destroyed that area was an emperor-level expert. He has no hope in this lifetime. Maybe it's because I've received too much stimulation that I'm hallucinating. Sun Ziwang turned a deaf ear to these comments and remained unmoved. He only knelt on the ground without moving, like an ascetic. Alas, why bother? Come in with me. A sigh came from the void, and a figure slowly emerged in front of Sun Ziwang. Sun Ziwang's face revealed a pleasantly surprised expression when he saw this figure appear. It was because the person he had been waiting for was the person in front of him. He had been waiting for 10 years. When he got up, a sore and numb feeling crawled all over his body. He hadn't used any of his power in the past 10 years in order to express his sincerity. He had almost collapsed as soon as he got up. Fortunately, he promptly circulated his power throughout his body and expelled the sore and numb feeling. He was surprised to find that he was obviously moving, but there wasn't any abnormality in the eyes of the people around him. They didn't even have the slightest strange expression. It was as if they hadn't seen him at all. He immediately understood that someone must have used a magic to isolate him. He immediately became excited. The person who could play this trick under the nose of the astral sect was absolutely a great expert. He followed that figure and walked faster and faster. Soon, he entered a different dimension. It was obvious that he had already left the Fortune Divine Dynasty's plane. The shock in his heart was difficult to conceal. It must be known that the space of the Fortune world was incomparably firm. Almost all of these dimensions were naturally formed. On the contrary, there were very few that were formed after birth. This was because it wasn't possible for an ordinary person to form such a dimension in the Fortune world. On the sacred mountain of this dimension, high up in the clouds, a blue figure appeared indistinctly. The figure who had led him here had also turned into a sky full of clear air and disappeared in front of Sun Ziwang. Sun Ziwang quickly understood. He quickly knelt down and said, "Junior son, Ziwang greets senior." In the clouds, he opened his eyes and looked at Sun Ziwang. 10 years ago, in order to avoid the search of the heavenly Taoism, he had to find a quiet place to recuperate and make a breakthrough. He had chosen the astral sect. Sun Ziwang had inadvertently seen him, and he had knelt outside for 10 years. The head of the astral sect had been alarmed and had come to investigate. However, a trivial quasi-emperor naturally couldn't see Yi Shiwen's whereabouts. Sun Ziwang's sincerity was commendable. However, Yi Shiwen didn't have the intention to give him a way out. If he accepted a random person as a disciple after kneeling for a few years, then he would have too many disciples. However, what really changed Yi Shiwen's mind was that Sun Ziwang had the physique of a heavenly devil even though he was a human. After coming to the Fortune world for a while, he discovered that there were also the human race, devil race, phoenix race, dragon race, and so on in the Fortune world. However, they weren't as strong as in the myriad heavens world. There were still many races that could be compared to these races. Moreover, it was different from the races in the myriad heavens world. Because of the existence of the Fortune God Dynasty in the Fortune world, all the races were under the rule of the Fortune God Dynasty. Although there were still contradictions between the races, it wasn't as sharp as in the myriad heavens world. The main conflict was the struggle between the Fortune Divine Dynasty and the various sects, as well as the struggle for enlightenment. Therefore, it was very common for the sects to have people of different races, and even mixed bloods of several races were not uncommon. This was completely different from the myriad heavens world. Therefore, there was a human like Sun Ziwang in the astral sect. However, what surprised Yi Shiwen was that Sun Ziwang actually had the physique of a heavenly devil. In the myriad heavens world, the devil race was a race. However, in the Fortune God Dynasty, the devil race was a Tao, a kind of attribute. Everyone could become a devil, and everyone could become a devil. There were also many devil cultivators in the Fortune God Dynasty, and they were quite powerful. The devil race in the Fortune God Dynasty wasn't like the 8 great royal clans in the myriad heavens world. Anyone who had become a devil could call themselves a devil. It was the same in the myriad heavens world. A human who had become a devil would become a human devil. There were all kinds of bloodlines in the human race, and there were as many physiques as there were stars in the galaxy. However, the heavenly devil physique was extremely rare. Therefore, in Yi Shiwen's opinion, Sun Ziwang had chosen the wrong side. Although Sun Ziwang was considered good in the astral sect, it was still a waste of his heavenly devil physique. If he had become a devil cultivator, he would have made tremendous progress. In fact, his potential wouldn't be inferior to Fairy Tian Miao, White Daozi, and the others that Yi Shiwen had met before. It wasn't impossible for him to step into the sovereign emperor realm in the future. At that time, he wouldn't have let down the Devil King's trust. Of course, the prerequisite was that he had taught him well. Yi Shiwen had entered closed-door training to recuperate 10 years ago. He had finally recovered to the peak of the third realm. He had just come out of closed-door training, and he already knew about Sun Ziwang's matter. He didn't want to pay attention to him. However, who would have thought that he would discover Sun Ziwang's hidden heavenly devil physique? This physique was hidden very deeply. It wouldn't be easy to discover it if Yi Shiwen didn't have the skill. He had once promised the Devil King that he would find a suitable successor for him. After all, he had inherited a part of the Devil King's mantle. However, he couldn't be considered as the Devil King's successor. Yi Mo was only the Devil King's tool spirit. Moreover, he had already become an emperor, so it could be said that he had taken another path. However, he wasn't a successor. Yi Shiwen had inspected some people when he had passed through the Devil World in the Myriad Heavens world. However, it was a pity that none of them met the requirements of the Devil King's successor. Innate physique was very important for a cultivator. The more compatible the physique was, the more rapid and limitless one's future would be. Yi Shiwen was the only one in the entire world who could forcibly practice the devil power with the physique of an ordinary person. Moreover, he had the help of the mysterious space. It was a miracle that no one else could replicate. However, the lifespan of an emperor was unlimited. Therefore, he hadn't been very anxious about this matter. However, Sun Ziwang had appeared in front of him at this time. This had made him think of something. This was indeed a good seedling. Sun Ziwang's heavenly devil physique, coupled with his perseverance, would be the best for him to practice the devil power. "Get up," Yi Shiwen said in a gentle voice. "Thank you, senior," Sun Ziwang quickly said. His palms were tightly clenched. He hadn't felt this way for a long time. Ever since he caught a glimpse of her, he firmly believed that if there was a time in his life where he could change his fate, it had to be now, and it had to be this person in front of him. "Master, please accept me as your disciple," Sun Ziwang gritted his teeth and said. Yi Shiwen looked at Sun Ziwang and said with a faint smile, "Why do you want me to be your master?" Chapter 30-35. Because I want to take revenge. Sun Ziwang gritted his teeth and said, "Because my parents died in the hands of foreign creatures. I must kill my enemies with my own hands." Even if you want to kill your enemy with your own hands, you don't necessarily need to look for me. Even if the Constellation Sect doesn't have a sovereign overseeing it, the Constellation Sect does. Wouldn't it be more hopeful to look for them? Said Yi Shiwen as he looked at Sun Ziwang. There are too many talented disciples in the Astral Sect. It won't be my turn. Sun Ziwang gritted his teeth and finally said it in a dejected manner. It was indeed not easy to admit that he was inferior to others. "Then, are you sure I will teach you?" Yi Shiwen asked. "I'm not sure, but if I don't try, I'm afraid I won't have any hope in this life," Sun Ziwang said honestly. He also knew that if such a super expert hated him, he might not have the chance to change his fate in the future. "Very well. At least you didn't try to deceive me." With Yi Shiwen's current cultivation, he could naturally see through everything at a glance. "Junior doesn't dare," Sun Ziwang quickly said in fear and trepidation. "Since I brought you in, I'll say it directly. I'm not from the Astral Sect. I'm not even from the Astral Sect. Are you mentally prepared for this?" Yi Shiwen asked. "I'm ready," Sun Ziwang said. He wanted to take revenge, so he tried every means to join the Astral Sect. However, it turned out that the Astral Sect wasn't suitable for him. No matter how hard he practiced, he wasn't outstanding among his peers. For revenge, he could sell his soul to the devil, let alone this. "May I ask for your name, Master?" Sun Ziwang was overjoyed and said. He wasn't stupid. After hearing this, how could he not understand that Yi Shiwen had the intention to accept him? "Don't call me Master. I don't intend to accept you as a disciple. I'm only teaching you martial arts on behalf of others," Yi Shiwen said, "but I can still be a teacher." Teacher and master were not the same concept. The so-called a teacher for a day is a father for life was actually a master, because not only did he have to teach martial arts, but he also had to teach everything just like a father. The teacher was only responsible for imparting some specific knowledge. Strictly speaking, they couldn't be confused. "Greetings, teacher." Although Sun Ziwang was a little disappointed, he didn't dare to show it. Yi Xuan saw his expression and said, "Although I'm only teaching on behalf of someone else, but you can't think that he's inferior to me. In fact, in terms of cultivation, he may be a notch higher than me. His title is Devil King. As for my name, my surname is Yi Xuan, and my given name is Martial Emperor. However, it's best that you don't say anything to the public, because I'm currently hiding from an extremely powerful enemy. So, it wouldn't be a good thing for you if you knew too much about me." Yi Xuan said. "Yi Xuan." Sun Ziwang suddenly opened his eyes wide because he finally thought of something. Although he had been kneeling for 10 years, it didn't mean that he didn't know anything. The disciples who came and went could always bring some news. In the past 10 years, the Eastern Domain had been in chaos. Legend had it that a peerless demon had appeared and killed by Daozi and other peerless geniuses of the heavenly Tao. Later, he had even killed Shura, Holy Emperor, who had been an emperor for many years. His ferocious might was monstrous. In many legends, this was enough to stop a child from crying. However, he had never imagined that the legendary demon who could stop a child from crying was actually the teacher in front of him. No matter how he looked at it, he didn't seem like such a character. Then, he was overwhelmed by an extreme surprise. An emperor level master was still a high and mighty existence in the Fortune God dynasty. God knew how many people wanted to become a disciple of an emperor level master. Once one became a disciple of an emperor, it would be like a carp leaping through the dragon's gate, and the great hatred in his heart would have hoped to be avenged. Although it was a little regretful that he didn't become a disciple of his teacher, but another master. But just by listening to the name, he knew that this person was not an ordinary person. He was also an emperor. Because in the Fortune God dynasty, there was no difference between the myriad worlds and the Fortune God dynasty. Ordinary people would not dare to use suffixes such as monarch, emperor, and emperor. Only those who had truly reached the emperor level could have such a possibility. In other words, the person who had taught him was an emperor, and he had also become a disciple of an emperor. This kind of opportunity could be said to be extremely great. His super enemy was just an emperor-level master. Devil Path's reputation wasn't very good in the myriad worlds and the myriad worlds. But reputation was nothing as long as he could take revenge. "Yes, I'm the Yi Xuan. So, don't say anything to others. Otherwise, I'll be fine, but you won't have a foothold in the eastern region," Yi Xuan said. He had just come out of closed-door training, and he already knew that Heavenly Tao had been searching everywhere for his whereabouts. They had even blocked the entire eastern region's transmission array. Anyone who wanted to enter or leave would have to undergo inspection. This had aroused the dissatisfaction of many big sections. However, no one was willing to provoke Heavenly Tao at this critical juncture when Heavenly Tao was burning with anger. So, they could only turn a blind eye to this. Fortunately, Heavenly Tao hadn't gone to the extreme. They hadn't gone so far as to block all the roads and prevent people from leaving. They only needed to undergo inspection. Heavenly Tao had done this to prevent Yi Xuan from escaping from the eastern region. However, they hadn't thought that Yi Xuan had never thought of escaping. Therefore, they had spent a lot of time at the border. Heavenly Tao could only set up defenses at some key junctures. Then, they would search everywhere. After all, the strength of one sect was limited. It was impossible to cover the sky with one hand. Even Astral Sect had been visited several times. However, they hadn't found Yi Xuan hiding in the dimensional plane. Astral Sect was behind Astral Star Sect. Therefore, the people of Heavenly Tao wouldn't dare to act recklessly no matter how strong they were. They would only conduct a cursory inspection at most. And this was exactly what Yi Xuan wanted. This was also the fundamental reason why he had chosen Astral Sect in the first place. This disciple understands. Sun Ziwang quickly bowed and said, "This teacher was carrying the monstrous killing intention of Heavenly Tao. However, how could an opportunity have fallen on him if it wasn't so? Since he had already reached this point, there was nothing to be afraid of. Do you know why I've given you a way out? Do you really think that I've been moved because you've knelt for 10 years? Yi Shiwen said with a faint smile on his face. I wouldn't dare. Sun Ziwang might have had this kind of idea before. However, it had disappeared without a trace now. How could he speculate about an Emperor King level expert? He was thinking too much if he wanted to accept him as a disciple because he was moved. It's because you're suitable. The Devil King's demonic power is world-shaking. So, the disciple must also have such aptitude. Yi Shiwen said. This was the most important reason why he had chosen Sun Ziwang. Of course, he had already conducted a moral assessment. This moral assessment didn't make him a saint. It just didn't allow him to commit treacherous acts like betraying his master and destroying his ancestors. Yi Shiwen was very confident in his vision. It was impossible for him to make an error in judgment. That's why I said that you're not suitable to practice the martial arts of the Constellation Sect. The martial arts of the Constellation Sect may be regarded as brilliant, but it's not suitable for you. It will restrict your heavenly devil physique. So, the most suitable way is to practice the demonic power. Didn't your parents die in the hands of the foreign creatures? So, you'll have a great chance of taking revenge if you can successfully practice the demonic power that I've passed on to you. Yi Shiwen said. He had naturally thoroughly investigated Sun Ziwang, since he was going to accept him as a disciple on behalf of the Devil King. With his current means, this was as easy as lifting a finger. Thank you very much, teacher, Sun Ziwang said in a happy and sincere manner. I'll still be doing closed-door training here for a period of time. But I'll leave an avatar to guide you in your cultivation. You'll come here every once in a while. I'll check your progress and teach you new martial arts. As for the rest, you'll need to obtain and plunder by yourself. This is how the demonic path works, Yi Shiwen said. He came out of seclusion this time and took in Sun Jinwang on a whim. In his plan, the next step was to truly break through to the fourth realm. For this, he had prepared for a long time. Now that his injuries had healed, he could naturally break through to the fourth realm in one go. For the Sovereign Kings, the fourth realm was a very obvious watershed. From the initial stage to the intermediate stage, their combat prowess would go up a big step. At that time, they would be able to calmly deal with the pursuit of the heavenly Taoism. Yes, Sun Ziwang replied. Yi Shiwen glanced at him and separated a wisp of his spirit avatar. Then, his main body slowly disappeared in front of Sun Ziwang. Yi Shiwen's avatar looked at Sun Ziwang and said, Internal power is the foundation of all martial arts. I'll teach you the Devil King's internal power first. Then, I'll teach you martial arts and so on. You can learn them one by one. From now on, you'll come here every once in a while. If you want to obtain anything else, you'll have to rely on your own hands to fight for it. Yes, Sun Ziwang said. Although he knew that it was only an avatar in front of him, he didn't dare to slack off. From now on, he had to rely on himself to fight for everything. And now, he had a sovereign king as his teacher. In a sense, he was standing on the same starting point as those peerless geniuses of the Supreme Sections. If he still couldn't take revenge in the end, then he would have nothing to hope for in this life. While Sun Ziwang secretly vowed to avenge his family, Yi Shiwen had already entered closed-door training and was in the stage of sprinting with all his might. Chapter 30-36. In order to break through to the fourth realm, Yi Shiwen had been preparing for many years. The fourth realm was different from the previous ones. Even the difficulty of all the previous breakthroughs was not as difficult as the fourth realm. This was the stage and strength of advancing from the initial stage to the middle stage of the Sovereign Lord realm. His foundation hadn't been sufficient before. However, he had made continuous preparations over the years. In addition, he had also obtained a rubbing of the Tao character. This was undoubtedly a pleasant surprise for him. He had been able to peer into the origin of the Great Path. He sat cross-legged on the cloud bed, and the enlightening mind ancient tree behind him was constantly blooming with dazzling seven-colored light. It was just a seedling in the past, but now the enlightening mind ancient tree had already grown into a towering tree. However, it was different from the original enlightening mind ancient tree. Yi Shiwen had guessed that the enlightening mind ancient tree might be a subspecies of the world tree. However, it was far less powerful than the original world tree. However, he had obtained a sapling of the world tree. So, he had decided to cultivate a part of the enlightening mind ancient tree's characteristics. He did not simply think that the enlightening mind ancient tree was far inferior to the world tree. At least in terms of assisting in cultivation, the enlightening mind ancient tree was far superior to the world tree. Since Yi Shiwen had cultivated to this level, there were very few external objects that were useful to him, especially those that directly helped him in cultivation. Apart from the enlightening mind ancient tree, there was only the mysterious space left. His cultivation speed was so fast, not just because of the mysterious space. The mysterious space's effect was more significant, helping Yi Shiwen overcome various difficulties. The influence of the enlightening mind ancient tree was like a thin stream of water, speeding up Yi Shiwen's cultivation. Yi Shiwen wouldn't have been able to step into the sovereign emperor realm without the help of the enlightening mind ancient tree. So, he wouldn't have been able to break through to the fourth realm. The word Taub emerged in front of him. Although it was just a rubbing, it was also a product of the heavenly Taoism. Naturally, it was also a high-quality product. Just the material that carried this rubbing version was rare in the world. Yi Shiwen swallowed a yellow middle plum, and it turned into monstrous martial power. It was endless like the sea, and part of it poured into the mysterious space. Suddenly, in Yi Shiwen's eyes, the word Tao was not just the word Tao. It began to evolve into many words. These words were simple, profound, and difficult to understand. However, they were like the nerves of creation in Yi Shiwen's eyes. They contained supreme mysteries. At the same time, many special Tao runes appeared around Yi Shiwen. These were the scriptures that he had borrowed from the various emperor lords. Although they didn't have specific cultivation methods, Yi Shiwen didn't need them. What he needed were words that directly touched upon the great Tao. These chapters turned into Tao runes that began to corroborate the Tao character. There were even many truths of the great Tao contained within. This Tao character was indeed extraordinary. Yi Shiwen frantically urged the mysterious space during this process, and began to deduce the various mysteries of this Tao character. Time passed second by second as Yi Shiwen went into closed-door training. While Yi Shiwen was in closed-door training, the Astral Star sect was in a turbulent situation. The battle between the eastern region and the outer region was getting more and more intense. The casualties on both sides were also getting more and more intense. And the Astral Star sect was recruiting more and more new disciples. More and more disciples came in, which led to a storm in the Astral sect, especially among the young disciples. There were even more dazzling stars. Among these people, Sun Zhuang was like a comet and stood out among the many disciples. He had already surpassed all the disciples of the same generation who had entered the sect at the same time as him after only 20 years of cultivation. He had become the number one person among the disciples of the same generation. After 200 years, he had proven his Tao with strength that far surpassed his peers. He had directly broken the record of becoming a god in the Astral Star sect. The entire Astral Star sect was shocked after receiving the news that he had proven his Tao and become a god. That was because Sun Zhuang hadn't proven his Tao and become a god in the outer region. Instead, he had proven his Tao and become a god in the outer region. This period was fake. Sun Zhuang would return to the Astral Star sect for a fixed period of time to receive Yi Shiwen's guidance. Then he would fight in the outer region. He didn't even stay in the Astral Star sect for a long time. Moreover, many disciples had entered the Astral Star sect during these years. Therefore, many people didn't know that Sun Zhuang had thoroughly shocked the entire Astral Star sect when he had returned. Sun Zhuang's cultivation age was less than 1,000 years. Being able to cultivate to the point of confirming the Tao in a mere 1,000 years was extremely rare in the Astral Star sect. Even in the entire Astral Star sect, there were only a few existences that could do so. Sun Zhuang's performance soon attracted the attention of the higher-ups of the Astral Star sect. Although Sun Zhuang was a disciple of the Astral Star sect, The Astral Star Sect itself was a subordinate sect of the Astral Star Sect. Since Sun Zhuang's performance was outstanding, it was possible for him to be transferred to the Astral Star Sect. However, this was just the beginning. After proving his Tao, Sun Zhuang only used a few hundred years to cultivate to the peak of Tao confirmation. Such cultivation progress shocked the entire Astral Star Sect. Even the Astral Star Sect's patriarch was moved. However, as more and more people paid attention to this matter, the fact that Sun Zhuang didn't practice the martial arts of the Astral Star Sect was also dug out. Sun Zhuang's demonic power was still very conspicuous. Especially as Sun Zhuang's cultivation gradually rose, he couldn't hide his demonic qi even if he wanted to. Sun Zhuang didn't have the intention to hide it. In the Fortune God dynasty, although the devil race had many enemies, and the devil path had many powerful enemies, the devil path wasn't a taboo in the Fortune God dynasty. There were many people who practiced the devil path's martial arts, so it wasn't a big deal. Although he didn't practice the martial arts of the Astral Star Sect, it wasn't a big deal. There were many dazzling geniuses in this world. Which one of them only practiced the martial arts of their sect? They had all kinds of fortuitous encounters, and the martial arts they learned were like the stars in the sky, innumerable. Although it was a small problem that he didn't practice the martial arts of the Astral Star Sect, it wasn't a big deal. Most importantly, the talent and cultivation aptitude that Sun Zhuang displayed was worthy of the attention of the entire Astral Star Sect. Moreover, as time went by, Sun Zhuang's cultivation speed didn't slow down. On the contrary, with the development of the Heavenly Devil's physique, his cultivation speed also gradually increased. It didn't slow down because of the advancement of the realm. On the contrary, it was further improved. But soon, many rumors about Sun Zhuang being guided by an expert also spread. Everyone could see that the demonic technique that Sun Zhuang practiced was a very profound martial art. Even though he had cultivated to the Tao-confirming realm, it didn't slow down because of this. On the contrary, it was still constantly improving. This was the power of a high-grade cultivation technique. After cultivating a low-grade cultivation technique to a high-grade realm, it would gradually slow down. However, if one cultivated a high-grade cultivation technique, the higher the cultivation, the faster the cultivation speed would be. The higher the cultivation, the more obvious the effect of the cultivation would be. Furthermore, what he had learned were all demonic arts. He had not only obtained the inheritance of a single martial art, but had obtained a systematic inheritance. Moreover, there were also ordinary martial art inheritances from time to time. This quickly attracted the attention of many people. Many people remembered that Sun Zhuang had once knelt on the stone steps for 10 years. This matter was rarely mentioned after Sun Zhuang's rise. But now, as this speculation came out, many people thought in this direction because it sounded like this possibility was the most likely. At first, it sounded very ridiculous and unreliable. However, now that they thought about it, it wasn't impossible. Sun Zhuang seemed to have risen after that. It was hard to say whether he had obtained the inheritance of a super expert or not. Many people had already confirmed this. After all, this was the most likely explanation. Sun Zhuang had never answered this question, and with his current status, if he didn't answer it himself, who could force him to answer? Although the higher-ups also wanted to know, everyone had their own fortuitous encounters. It was impossible for them to expel a disciple with a limitless future because of this. After Sun Zhuang's fame had shaken the world with his demonic techniques, it had even attracted the attention of some big shots of the Devil Path. Some big shots of the Devil Path had even asked the Astral Sect if they could give this disciple to them. For the Astral Sect, the demonic techniques that Sun Zhuang had learned might cause some arguments. However, for the Devil factions, Sun Zhuang, who had obtained the inheritance of demonic techniques, was the best disciple. It was even possible for him to obtain a matchless demonic technique. In addition, Sun Zhuang had shown his talent in cultivating demonic techniques. This had made the Devil faction's people very thirsty. There were also many people who had secretly contacted Sun Zhuang, and there were even a lot of Devil cult members who offered him the position of a Devil cult's holy son as long as he handed over the Devil power that he was practicing and surrendered to them. Then his future would be limitless. However, Sun Ziwang wasn't moved by these enticements. It didn't matter whether they came from the higher-ups of the astral sect or the devil factions. In fact, he didn't even move a little. That was because he knew very well who he had. So, he naturally didn't dare to express anything without Yi Shiwen's permission. Moreover, as far as he was concerned, how could a holy sun and the like compare to his current situation? Yi Shiwen had taught him the demonic techniques over the years. His skills had advanced by leaps and bounds. In a short time, he had already left the other disciples far behind, and had become the focus of countless people's attention. For him, the astral sect was his master's sect. However, Yi Shiwen had recognized his worth. So, it was impossible for him to betray him. Therefore, he had always completely ignored these enticements. Sun Ziwang's approach had aroused the anger of some people. Chapter 30-37. Sun Ziwang's indifferent attitude soon attracted the dissatisfaction of many people, including some well-known demonic path powerhouses. For them, what kind of glory was it to extend an olive branch to a junior with their status? However, the result was that they were rejected. It could even be said that they were ignored. They didn't even have the slightest bit of interest. The high-level officials of the Constellation sect also rejected Sun Ziwang. This was also Yi Shiwen's intention. They were merely a group of quasi-emperors. They didn't even have emperor-monarch level experts. There was no need to think too much. Although this might offend some people, in Yi Shiwen's view, this was also a kind of tempering. Unless there was an expert of emperor-monarch level, Yi Shiwen wouldn't even look at them. However, experts of emperor-monarch level would not care about such a small matter. The speed of Sun Ziwang's rise was so fast that even the head of the Constellation sect and the high-level officials of the Constellation sect began to pay attention. However, for experts of emperor-monarch level, it was nothing. How could an ant-like existence attract the attention of existences of that level? Only those who had reached the level of Baidaozi and Tian Miao Fairy would be able to attract their attention. Because these people had truly touched the level of Emperor Monarch, there was a possibility that they would truly enter that realm. Therefore, they would be worthy of a second glance. However, it was just a second glance. For example, when Baidaozi faced Yi Shiwen, he killed him without the slightest scruple. After Sun Ziwang rejected the recruitment of many great figures from all sides, Sun Ziwang encountered a lot of trouble. The people of the demonic path had always been straightforward. Almost immediately after Sun Ziwang rejected the recruitment of all sides, he was attacked by the people of the demonic path. In particular, Sun Ziwang traveled between the outer domain and the Constellation sect all year round. In the outer domain itself, there was chaos and chaos. Experts from all sides intersected, making it extremely chaotic. The revenge of the devil experts soon arrived. They launched several surprise attacks and almost beheaded Sun Ziwang. But in the end, Sun Ziwang used his devil wings to escape. Although the devil wings that Yi Shiwen had taught him were not the devil wings that he had fused with the power of time and space laws, but for these gods, it was still an extremely fast agility technique. Even if the people chasing him were far more powerful than him, he still managed to escape. After being hunted down several times, not only did Sun Ziwang not die, on the contrary, after escaping from death a few times, his cultivation soared and he broke through to the imperishable realm. In turn, he killed some fiend celestials of the fiendish Tao, causing his reputation to soar. However, this did not scare the demonic path experts. On the contrary, it completely enraged the demonic path experts, leading to more suppression and pursuit. Normally speaking, no matter how arrogant the devil path experts were, they wouldn't dare to brazenly pursue and kill people who had a master, especially when there was a colossus like the astral sect behind the astral sect. They couldn't rashly start a war. However, because Sun Ziwang didn't respond to the astral sect's higher-ups' attempts to rope him in, some people in the astral sect wanted to teach this kid who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth a lesson. Once he suffered enough, he would naturally know how precious these olive branches were. Therefore, the higher-ups of the astral sect adopted a rare tacit attitude towards the desperate pursuit of the devil path experts. The Devil Path experts didn't know why, but since it was so, they couldn't let Sun Ziwang off. For Sun Ziwang, this was the most difficult day. The Devil Path experts who had no scruples chased after Sun Ziwang in waves. Sun Ziwang was chased to the point that he wished he was dead. There were several times when he narrowly escaped death, and even when he narrowly escaped death, he finally managed to escape. During this process, Sun Ziwang's strength also improved at an astonishing speed. He had obtained tremendous growth. Especially after several life and death experiences, his strength had increased rapidly. He was approaching the peak of the imperishable realm at an astonishing speed. As time went by, Sun Ziwang's reputation in the astral sect also became more and more resounding. The rumors about the expert behind him also gradually died down. That was because everyone in the astral sect knew how many times Sun Ziwang had been chased and assassinated during this period of time. If he really had the support of a top-notch expert, then that expert would have watched helplessly as his successor was chased everywhere and almost killed. Moreover, it wasn't just once or twice, but countless times. The number of times Sun Ziwang had been hunted down over the years was shocking even to the higher-ups of the Constellation sect. They simply couldn't imagine it. If they were in Sun Ziwang's shoes, they would have died a long time ago. During this process, the devil power that Sun Ziwang cultivated had also entered the eyes of countless people. Although no one could recognize the devil power that Sun Ziwang had cultivated, they could see that the devil power that Sun Ziwang had cultivated was of an extremely high level. In fact, it wasn't the slightest bit inferior to the several great devil sects that had been passed down for generations. At this time, everyone could see that Sun Ziwang had probably obtained the inheritance of a devil monarch. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for him to have such an amazing performance. It was no wonder that many experts of the devil sects would go all out to hunt down Sun Ziwang. After all, everyone was very clear about what the inheritance of a devil monarch meant. If one could obtain the complete inheritance of a devil monarch, even if he couldn't re-establish a great sect, he could immediately transcend. His future achievements would be limitless. Even if it was impossible to prove the Tao and become an emperor, but at least he would end up as a peak quasi-emperor. For the vast majority of people, an emperor was no different than a legend. It was simply unattainable. Even if it was merely a peak quasi-emperor, it was already an unimaginable achievement for ordinary people. Although there were many people in the Constellation sect who were envious of Sun Ziwang, who possessed the inheritance of the devil monarch, they were still of the same sect after all. There were still many old monsters in the Constellation sect. These people would absolutely not allow their fellow sect members to kill each other for an inheritance to this extent. After all, the Constellation sect was also a great sect that had been passed down for generations. Moreover, there was an emperor presiding over it. Although they were envious of the inheritance of another devil monarch, they would not act recklessly. Moreover, as time passed, everyone could see that Sun Ziwang's present achievements had a lot to do with his physique. Not everyone was suitable to cultivate this devil power. Instead of competing for the inheritance of the devil monarch, it was better to win over Sun Ziwang as early as possible. Even if he couldn't become an emperor in the future, he could still add another super expert to the Constellation sect. If he became an emperor, it would be even more amazing. He would almost immediately establish a sect and become another giant of the Constellation sect. Moreover, the Constellation sect could not target Sun Ziwang just because he had a fortuitous encounter. Otherwise, the entire Constellation sect would be in a state of panic. Therefore, a strange scene had formed over the years. Sun Ziwang was constantly being hunted down, but the Constellation sect did not make any movements at all. It was as if they were letting him be hunted down. In the beginning, those devil experts still had some misgivings. However, as time passed, such misgivings also disappeared without a trace. They began to desperately hunt him down. In fact, all of this was seen by Yi Shiwen. After all, he was an emperor. It was too easy for him to see these things. However, he did not make a move because he had reached the most critical moment. He could not fail even once to break through to the fourth realm. He could not relax even once. There was no chance for him to make a move. Moreover, This was also a test he gave to Sun Ziwang. If he could not even pass this test, then what qualifications did he have to accept the inheritance of the Devil Monarch? To put it cruelly, if Sun Ziwang died, he could still wait for the next one. It was not a big deal at all. As long as he was still alive, the inheritance of the Devil Monarch would not be broken. The word Taub evolved into countless Tao characters that poured into his mind. It tried to use the simplest words to explain all the ways of the world. In front of Yi Shiwen, numerous cracks began to appear on that Tao character. After Yi Shiwen had comprehended it countless times, this Tao character finally couldn't withstand it anymore, and cracks began to appear on it. This was also the reason why Yi Shiwen said that he could only succeed once and could not fail. Because once the word Taub in front of him cracked, he could not find another word Tao to replace it. After all, this was only a rub version of the word Tao and not the real word Tao. It could not be like the real word Tao that could withstand countless comprehensions and be fine. It was already a critical moment. However, Yi Shiwen's state of mind was under the protection of the enlightening mind ancient tree. It was as if he was casually dealing with a very small matter. It was not a big deal at all. He opened his mouth and swallowed another yellow middle plum. This was the 10th yellow middle plum that he had swallowed in the past few years. Each yellow middle plum contained an inexhaustible amount of energy. One could well imagine what he had achieved in the past few years. He didn't know how much time had passed. He could only see the Tao characters flying all over the sky of the entire microcosm. It seemed as if they were sensing something. They were flying in a special trajectory. On the other side of the microcosm, Sun Ziwang had just returned from the outer domain. He was dumbstruck when he saw this scene. He couldn't help but open his mouth and ask, What is this? My main body is about to make a breakthrough, and it's right in front of me." Yi Shiwen's doppelganger frowned and said, his mind was connected to his main body, so he naturally knew that this was the most critical moment. He didn't even have the mood to ask Sun Ziwang about his harvest this time. He just stared at his main body in the depths of the microcosm. Sun Ziwang swallowed a mouthful of saliva when he heard this. He still had an incredulous look on his face. Is this the breakthrough of an Emperor Lord? To think that he would actually encounter such a thing. It was simply a stroke of luck. Suddenly, a monstrous aura spread from the depths of the microcosm. This aura seemed as if it would break the vault of heaven. It diffused in all directions. "Which Taoist brother is here?" A majestic voice suddenly came from outside the microcosm. Chapter 3038. Just as Sun Ziwang was dumbfounded, the endless laws in the entire microcosm were dancing and cheering. It was as if the world was being reborn from a cocoon. An astonishing scene that he had never seen before was unfolding in front of him. Emperor, so this is the power of an emperor. Although he had experienced many life and death situations in the past few years, he could be considered to be extremely glorious. He was the focus of countless people, and it was unavoidable for him to feel a little complacent in his heart. However, at this moment, this complacency disappeared without a trace. Only at this moment did he truly understand what the might of a sovereign emperor was. Although he had deliberately controlled it, the aura that spread out still made him feel the difference between heaven and earth. At this time, he really understood why an emperor was the real ruler of the world. In front of a real emperor, a quasi-emperor was simply not enough. Immediately, there was a burst of joy in his heart. Although Yi Shiwen was only imparting martial arts on behalf of the Demon King, in his heart, he was no different from a teacher. Now that his teacher had made a breakthrough, he was naturally very happy in his heart. But before he could react, a strange change occurred. "Which fellow Taoist is here?" Suddenly, a majestic voice came from outside the microcosm. This voice suddenly startled Sun Ziwang. Even Yi Shiwen's primordial spirit avatar slightly frowned. However, before they could react, a voice came from the depths of the microcosm. "Fellow Taoist, please come in." This was Yi Shiwen's voice. Immediately after, an opening automatically appeared in the pocket dimension, and a figure flew out. It was a handsome middle-aged man, but he had a medium build and wore a long robe made of golden star crystals. He exuded an unparalleled majesty and grace, stepping on a rainbow of starlight as he descended. Supreme Leader. Sun Ziwang took a deep breath. Although he had never seen the person in front of him, it did not prevent him from knowing who the person in front of him was. This was the Supreme Leader of the Astral Sect, and also the only Emperor of the Astral Sect, Star Emperor. He was known as the Supreme Monarch, who controlled the infinite stars. At the same time, he was also the invincible figure who founded the Astral Sect. However, in the past tens of millions of years, he had gradually moved behind the scenes. The affairs of the entire Astral Sect were managed by his eldest disciple, who was also the deputy sect leader of the Astral Sect. However, although he didn't care about worldly affairs and the disciples in recent years couldn't see him, it didn't prevent him from knowing about the deeds of the person in front of him. He was really incomparably valiant. Unarmed, he established the foundation of the Astral Sect in the eastern region, surrounded by many great sections. Moreover, he brought the Astral Sect to its current status. He had supreme authority in the Astral Sect. Although Sun Ziwang had never seen the real person, he had seen drawings, so he recognized it at a glance. To him, it had always been a legend, but now the legend had actually appeared here. To him, this was undoubtedly a great shock. Although Yi Shiwen was also a sovereign emperor, Yi Shiwen was a stranger to him, after all. He wasn't a great figure like the Star Emperor, who deeply influenced the Constellation Sect. Yi Shiwen sat cross-legged on the cloud bed and retracted all his aura like an ordinary person. The Star Emperor walked in slowly and said, "It turns out that you're a guest. Why didn't you inform me?" The Star Emperor's expression was calm, but there was a hint of dissatisfaction in his words. One should know that the Astral Sect was his inheritance. Now, another sovereign emperor had appeared in his sect without a sound. This was tantamount to a provocation. If it wasn't for the commotion when Yi Shiwen broke through and was detected by him, he didn't know how long he would be kept in the dark. It was impossible to say that he didn't mind at all. "It's rude of me to come here without notice. I'm just borrowing your treasured land to cultivate." Yi Shiwen slowly explained that he didn't have any malicious intent. The Star Emperor nodded in agreement. It was precisely because of this that he didn't immediately start a fight. Otherwise, with his temper, he would probably fight to the death. For the sovereign emperors, this was a taboo. Because the Fortune God dynasty was big enough, it wasn't a problem for each sovereign to rule a region. Therefore, many sovereign emperors were often sensitive to this issue. "But does brother want to accept my sect Sun Ziwang as a disciple?" asked the Star Emperor. During this period of time, he had heard about Sun Ziwang when he came out of closed-door cultivation. Such a small character couldn't possibly attract his attention. However, this Sun Ziwang had obtained the inheritance of a devil king, which attracted his attention. He was also a sovereign emperor. Naturally, he knew very well that it wasn't easy to obtain the complete inheritance of a sovereign emperor. What he was more afraid of was that this Sun Ziwang was a spy left behind by another devil king. If this was really the case, this Sun Ziwang would inevitably become a big trouble for the Astral Sect when he grew up. Therefore, he personally came to investigate. He didn't expect to encounter Yi Shiwen's cultivation breakthrough, and coincidentally caught some clues. "I think brother has misunderstood. I don't have the intention to accept him as a disciple. In fact, I'm just accepting a disciple on behalf of Senior Devil King. This is also his last wish. His earth-shattering devil power can't be cut off here." Yi Shiwen naturally understood what the Star Emperor was thinking. In this kind of situation, everyone would be very careful. Not to mention, he was very talented and would become the target of the sect's full cultivation. Therefore, he must be very cautious. At the same time, he also indicated that he wasn't the creator of the devil power. Compared to a living sovereign emperor, a dead devil king would undoubtedly make many people feel more at ease. Sure enough, the Star Emperor's complexion immediately became better. He could see that Yi Shiwen's cultivation was unfathomable, and he couldn't see through it. However, it was obvious that Yi Shiwen wasn't a devil cultivator. Moreover, Yi Shiwen's words also made him feel completely relieved. A living sovereign emperor might stir up trouble, but a dead sovereign emperor could only be regarded as a fortuitous encounter. At the same time, he was a little excited in his heart. If Sun Ziwang could thoroughly cultivate his devil power to the peak, it might be possible for the astral sect to have another devil king. Although the cultivation of the astral sect was quite different from that of the devil cultivators, it would at most allow him to establish his own sect again. Compared to the temptation of having another sovereign emperor, it was nothing at all. Then I really have to thank brother for imparting the power. The Star Emperor nodded lightly, officially confirming Sun Ziwang's affiliation, and included him in the key cultivation target of the astral sect. At this time, standing in his position, he naturally had to thank Yi Shiwen on behalf of his disciple. Brother, you don't have to thank me. I also saw that he was born with a heavenly devil physique, which is suitable for practicing devil power. Otherwise, I wouldn't have chosen him. Yi Shiwen said with a smile. How should I address you, brother? Star Emperor looked at Yi Shiwen and asked. My name is Yi Shiwen, Martial Emperor. Yi Shiwen opened his mouth and looked at the Star Emperor. He didn't have the slightest intention to conceal himself. The Star Emperor had never heard of the title of Martial Emperor. Obviously, he didn't know anyone. However, Yi Shiwen's name was really like a thunderclap piercing the ears. His name had been extremely famous recently. Although the Star Emperor was in closed-door training, it didn't mean that he wasn't aware of these matters. The heavenly Taoism had come to investigate several times. This matter had even alarmed the Star Emperor, who was in closed-door training. So, he was very clear about it. However, he didn't care about it at first because he really didn't know Yi Shiwen. He didn't usually do anything shameful, so he naturally wasn't afraid of ghosts knocking on his door in the middle of the night. However, he had never expected that Yi Shiwen was actually hiding in his sect. Although it was only the astral sect, and not the astral sect, the Star Emperor looked at Yi Shiwen secretly with fear in his eyes. From the information collected from various aspects, this martial emperor wasn't as harmless as he appeared to be. In fact, he was an extremely dangerous existence. He could offend a colossus like the heavenly Taoism just like that. He could also kill an emperor lord like the Shura holy emperor just like that. Such a person was directly on the dangerous list for emperor lords like them, because this person absolutely didn't show mercy. Once they offended him, it was very likely that they would face the situation of death from the other party's revenge. Oh, it's fellow Taoist martial emperor, said the Star Emperor as he cupped his hands. However, he had no intention of passing the news to the heavenly Taoism because he and the heavenly Taoism weren't on good terms. This was something that everyone in the entire Fortune God dynasty didn't know. The heavenly Taoism was a big family with countless experts in the sect. There were also many vassal sections. The experts were like the sand in the Ganges River. However, because of this, they also had countless enemies and had countless enemies. This Star Emperor was one of them. Moreover, the Star Emperor was one of the most powerful enemies of the heavenly Taoism. When he had founded the Constellation sect, he had faced the attacks and interference of the heavenly Taoism. His sect had almost perished. How could he let go of this deep-seated hatred? Although the Star Emperor didn't make any substantial retaliation because of the huge influence of the heavenly Taoism, it didn't mean that he had let go of the deep-seated hatred of the heavenly Taoism. At this time, he naturally hoped that the heavenly Taoism would cause more trouble. Therefore, he didn't have the slightest intention to inform the heavenly Taoism, even if the reward was very generous. Yi Shiwen looked at the Star Emperor with a smile. He knew this, so he finally chose the Constellation sect as the final place for closed-door training. It was different from other places. Even if he was discovered here, he wouldn't be betrayed and attract a large number of experts of the heavenly Taoism. Brother Martial Emperor has come as a guest. So, I should show some hospitality as a host. I wonder if you have time to go to my humble house for a chat, the Star Emperor said after a pause. Chapter 3039. That's exactly what I was thinking. Yi Shiwen nodded and said. Things had already come to this point. It would be unreasonable not to go and take a seat. He had nothing to worry about in the Constellation sect. However, Sun Ziwang would still have to stay in the Constellation sect for a long time. If he had the care of the Constellation sect's headmaster, then his future life would be smoother. That's great. Star Emperor nodded. If it was not necessary, he did not want to become enemies with Yi Shiwen. He could completely ignore the Emperor, but he could not ignore the top masters of the same level. "Martial Emperor, please come with me," Star Emperor said, and his figure had already broken through the sky. Yi Shiwen also followed closely behind. The two did not stop at the Constellation Sect, but directly entered the Constellation Sect. The Constellation Sect's myriad stars temple was like being in the midst of stars. Countless stars were condensed, and most of the star power absorbed was projected here. Yi Shiwen and Star Emperor sat on two cloud beds, facing each other. Yi Shiwen glanced at the entire Constellation Sect's formation. Although it was also incomparably brilliant, it was undoubtedly much weaker than the heavenly cycle great star formation that he knew. The martial power of the Demon Emperor back then was probably far superior to the current Star Emperor. Even if Star Emperor's main direction of cultivation was the power of the stars, the use of the power of the stars was much worse than that of the ancient heavenly court. Although the myriad heavens as a whole was lacking compared to the fortune realm, the outstanding figures were not inferior at all. Yi Shiwen picked up the teacup and took a sip of the spirit tea. Suddenly, his mouth was full of fragrance. Ordinary people did not have the opportunity to drink this level of top-notch tea. Even the Quasi-Emperor did not have such an opportunity. Only the masters of the Emperor Lord level could have such a chance. "I'm really sorry for taking the liberty to stay in your sect this time," Yi Shiwen said. "It's nothing. If you like it, why not stay here?" Star Emperor had completely let go of the grudge at this time. Anyway, there was no harm. On the contrary, Yi Shiwen had cultivated a super genius for their sect who might enter the Emperor Lord level in the future. No matter which sect it was, even the high and mighty Emperor would have a whole new level of respect for those super talented geniuses. Not long ago, they were also one of these people. If their great sects wanted to develop, they couldn't do without the help of these super geniuses. Yi Shiwen faintly smiled and said, "I think Taoist friend should be aware of my current situation. I'm afraid that heavenly Taoism won't let me off. I reckon that it won't take long for them to find out about today's matter. And they will come looking for me at that time." Star Emperor frowned slightly. What happened today had indeed caused a great disturbance. Even he, the leader, had come in person. It would not take long for this news to spread to the Taoism of heavenly law. Apart from themselves, no one knew how many chess pieces the heavenly Tao sect had buried in the Constellation sect. Similarly, he had also secretly planted some spies in the heavenly Tao sect. This was almost a semi-public matter. While everyone was desperately looking for the spies that the other sects had inserted, they also turned a blind eye to it. "Fellow cultivator, you are very frank," Star Emperor said. "Now, Taoist friend should have achieved a breakthrough in your closed-door training." Yi Shiwen raised his head and looked at Star Emperor. He asked about the situation of his cultivation breakthrough. Based on the relationship between the two of them, it was definitely a deep conversation. However, Yi Shiwen didn't know what Star Emperor wanted to do. "Indeed, it's not bad." Yi Shiwen's mind flickered slightly, and then he said, "May I know where Taoist friend wants to go next?" "As far as I know, the entire eastern region is under the control of the heavenly Tao sect. It's impossible to even leave the eastern region," said Star Emperor. This time, even several old monsters of the heavenly Tao sect who have not come out of closed-door training for many years have come out together. It can be seen that they valued Taoist friend very much. Speaking till here, he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. The person in front of him was really too valiant. Although he didn't deal with the heavenly Tao sect, he didn't dare to kill the emperor of the heavenly Tao sect in an above-board situation. Although they were both big sects, the gap between the Constellation sect, which only had one emperor, and the heavenly Tao sect, which had many experts, was simply unimaginable. If he really did it, then the Constellation sect would only end up being exterminated. However, the person in front of him didn't have any burden of the sect. Naturally, he did things without any taboos. "Later, I will go to the outer region. At that time, I will need Taoist friend to take care of Sun Ziwang," said Yi Shiwen. He didn't hide anything in this regard. Anyway, he was going to leave soon. It was too late for the heavenly Tao sect to encircle and intercept him. What are you talking about, Taoist friend? No matter what, Sun Ziwang is an outstanding disciple of our constellation sect. This is what I should do. Even if the Heavenly Tao sect wants to come and ask for him, they have to see if I agree or not. Star Emperor nodded and said, as the supreme leader of the constellation sect, he naturally couldn't let the Heavenly Tao sect act presumptuously here. However, if Taoist friend is going to the outer region, I wonder if you are interested in cooperating with me, said Star Emperor. Cooperation? What kind of cooperation? Yishuan suddenly became interested. Generally speaking, if it was an ordinary matter, there was nothing that a sovereign emperor couldn't handle. Why would he need to cooperate with others? To tell you the truth, some time ago, I found an extremely ancient Heavenly Master's remnant prescription. This remnant prescription recorded a kind of medicinal pill that can help sovereign emperors below the 7th realm to break through. After tens of thousands of years, several Taoist friends and I have worked tirelessly to fill in the gaps and finally completed this remnant prescription. Most of the heavenly treasures in this remnant prescription have been collected. However, we are still missing the most crucial one. This heavenly treasure is not in the Fortune God dynasty, but in the outer region. Therefore, I would like to invite Taoist friend to go together with us. When the medicinal pill is refined, we will share one with Taoist friend according to our previous agreement. What do you think? Said Star Emperor. Hiss! Even with Yi Shiwen's cultivation, he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. It was hard to imagine that it could help a sovereign emperor to break through to the next realm, even if it was only for a sovereign emperor below the 7th realm. Once it was released, it would immediately set off a great uproar in the Fortune God dynasty. Countless people would immediately come to fight for it. Even sovereign emperors would find it difficult to resist such temptation. At that time, the entire Fortune God dynasty would probably fall apart. If he had this medicinal pill, Yi Shiwen could be sure that even the 5th realm was just around the corner. He had just stepped into the 4th realm, and now even the 5th realm was within reach. It was needless to say how attractive it was to Yi Shiwen. But why did Taoist friend tell me such a top-secret matter? I think there are many people who are willing to help Taoist friend. Yi Shiwen immediately collected his thoughts and asked, indeed, as long as we reveal the matter of the medicinal pill, many people will be willing to come forward to help. However, does Taoist friend think that my constellation sect can keep such a medicinal pill? Once it attracts the attention of heavenly Taoism or even a colossus like the Fortune God dynasty, our lives will be in danger. Star Emperor immediately revealed the truth with a bitter smile. Taoist friend, you are alone, and you have a deep hatred for heavenly Taoism. Naturally, you are the most suitable candidate to join our team. From what Taoist friend said, are the others also rogue cultivators? Yi Shiwen suddenly became a little interested and asked. Although they are not rogue cultivators, they do not have the background of those big sections. At most, they're on the same level as me. Star Emperor said, for safety reasons, we do not dare to look for those with the background of those big sects, nor do we dare to look for those with outstanding strength. Otherwise, wouldn't we be helping others? So, Taoist friend, you also know our difficulties. There are not many people in the past tens of thousands of years. Yi Shiwen nodded. It was related to such a thing, no matter how careful they were. If this matter were to spread, the consequences would be unimaginable. If Taoist friend agrees, from now on, Taoist friend cannot leave for a period of time. You can only go with me to the outer domain to meet with other Taoist friends. Star Emperor said. Yi Shiwen considered for a long time, but he still could not resist the temptation of this medicinal pill. So he said, okay. Seeing that Yi Shiwen agreed, Star Emperor was slightly relieved. If Yi Shiwen did not agree, it would be a little troublesome for him. He had already said it. If Yi Shiwen were to spread it, the consequences would be unimaginable. In that case, we might as well go now. If we continue to wait, I am afraid that the people of heavenly Taoism will arrive soon, Star Emperor suggested. As Taoist friend says, Yi Shiwen nodded. The people of heavenly Taoism would arrive soon. Although he was not afraid of anything, he did not want to contend with them too early. In that case, come with me. There is a one-way transmission array in our Myriad Stars Temple. It can directly teleport to near the border of the outer domain. Star Empress said. This kind of transmission array was available in many big sections. It could help them move in time. At the most critical moment, it could even be a life-saving moment. However, because the teleportation place was a dangerous place like the outer domain, it could only be a one-way transmission array. It could not be a two-way transmission array. Yi Shiwen quickly entered the depths of the Myriad Stars Temple under the guidance of Star Emperor. A huge transmission array was emitting a faint light. The two stepped into the transmission array. The surrounding space was distorted. Yi Shiwen only felt his vision blur. Suddenly, he disappeared from the Myriad Stars Temple of the Myriad Stars sect. Chapter 3040. The border of the outer domain was a lawless area. It was also the extension of the Fortune God dynasty's rule. Outside of this emperor's body, it was a world of endless powerful creatures from the outer domain. No one knew how many powerful existences were hiding in the outer domain. There were tyrannical and violent creatures from the outer domain, and there were also powerhouses who were not tolerated by the Fortune God dynasty. It was precisely because of this that the outer domain became more and more dangerous. Even the gods did not dare to go too far, and the number of people who died in the outer domain was unknown. Even emperors could only protect themselves, and there was also the risk of death. In the records of the Fortune God dynasty, the number of emperors who died in the outer domain was the highest, and the number of emperors who died in the outer domain was innumerable. Among them, there were peerless masters of the Fortune God dynasty, and at the same time, there were super powerhouses who lived in the outer domain. In order to resist the invasion of the outer domain, the Fortune God dynasty set up outpost cities one after another in the eastern domain's border. These cities were also powerful fortresses with extremely strong defensive power, enough to resist the invasion of the outer domain's creatures. The border between the eastern domain and the outer domain was an endless sea of storms. In this sea of storms, each huge island was like a small continent, and there was a city fortress built on it. No one knew how many people lived in these cities. When Yi Shiwen regained his sight, he had already appeared in the middle of an endless sea. This sea was more violent than any he had seen before. Even with his eyesight as an emperor, he couldn't see through this sea. Even if the emperor's magical power was greatly suppressed in the Fortune world, it was still extremely amazing. However, this endless sea of storms was only a part of the outer domain that was connected to the eastern domain. At this time, Yi Shiwen finally understood why the people of the Fortune God dynasty would change their expressions when they talked about the outer domain. It was too vast, and no one knew how many tyrannical creatures there were. This was definitely a colossus that could rival the Fortune God dynasty. Yi Shiwen looked around and saw violent storms and tornadoes everywhere. They could casually blow up hundreds of thousands of feet tall, terrifying hurricanes. Countless formidable auras were hidden in these hurricanes. It seemed as if these hurricanes were moving demon lairs. These hurricanes could easily reach hundreds of thousands of feet in height, or even millions of feet in height. Yi Shiwen could see dozens of them at a glance. And this didn't include the hurricanes that were forming or leaving in the distance. He floated in the air. Although he was already tens of thousands of meters high, a wave came crashing down on him and the Star Emperor. It was 20 to 30,000 meters high. Bastard, you're courting death. A sharp glint flashed across Star Emperor's eyes. He abruptly slapped his palm, which instantly turned into a huge falling star and smashed into the incoming wave. Bang! Although the wave was huge, how could it compete with the power of the Star Emperor? It was smashed into pieces in an instant. One of the fierce sea beasts had just revealed itself when it was smashed into pieces. Its blood spilled into the seawater, which quickly attracted even more powerful sea beasts to devour it. Although all of this happened in an instant, Yi Shiwen still saw everything clearly. Although this ferocious beast was strong, it was only in the Divine King realm. It actually dared to attack an emperor with just its ferocious strength. It was really courting death. However, Even Yi Shiwen felt a little apprehensive about the harsh environment of this stormy sea region. Extremely powerful ominous beasts could be seen almost everywhere. The most frightening thing was that these ominous beasts were nurtured by nature. They weren't cultivated. Most of them didn't have any spiritual wisdom. Just like the ominous beast of God King level that had been casually killed by the Star Emperor. In other places, this kind of strength was enough to become an immortal. But here, it was just a fierce sea beast without much spiritual wisdom. The more it was like this, the more terrifying it was. In this way, the real overlords in the outer domain must be tyrannical to an unimaginable extent. Fortunately, most of these fierce sea beasts had no spiritual wisdom. No matter how strong they were still slightly inferior without spiritual wisdom. Otherwise, the entire Fortune God dynasty would have been occupied by these outer domain creatures. At this time, he suddenly recalled the history of the Fortune world that Fairy Tian Miao had mentioned. In the distant past, in an era where even the history could not be investigated, the Fortune world was in a desolate era. It was an era where fierce beasts ran amok. All intelligent life forms trembled under the tyranny of these fierce beasts. They were not a match for these fierce beasts. It was not until a supreme being appeared out of nowhere and took control of the Fortune world, sweeping away everything and establishing the Fortune God dynasty. Only then did the Fortune world create a land for the various races to flourish, isolating them from the outer domain. Back then, countless intelligent races had followed that paragon and waged war against the living beings of the outer realms. No one knew how long that war had lasted. They only knew that Paragon had used the power of creation to sweep through the outer realms one by one. Those invincible existences from the outer realms that had shaken the world had either been killed or suppressed, never to appear again for all eternity. Those who could be recorded by the later generations were super powerhouses with the title of Heavenly Venerables. The fallen Emperors didn't even have a title, let alone those below the Emperor realm. It was a super chaotic world where human lives were as cheap as grass. Because of this, the various races still believed in the rule of the Fortune God dynasty. If it weren't for the existence of that supreme, many races would still be trembling under the rule of the outer domain creatures, not daring to utter a word. Yi Shiwen sighed inwardly. However, Star Emperor didn't seem surprised at all and said, "Let's go. We'll talk after entering Storm City." As Star Emperor said this, he stepped on a ray of light and flew towards a small continent hundreds of thousands of miles away. Yi Shiwen glanced at that small island, which looked like a small continent. An incomparably huge city towered on the island. Enchantments could be seen everywhere. Formidable practitioners and ferocious, ominous beasts were fighting everywhere in the surroundings of the city. Some ominous beasts were killed by the practitioners, and some practitioners were swallowed by the ominous beasts in one bite. Death was the eternal theme here. It had long been a common sight here, and no one showed the slightest bit of surprise. But soon, Yi Shiwen caught up with Star Emperor. Both of them were Emperor level masters, and their speed was unimaginably fast. Hundreds of thousands of miles only took a moment for them to arrive at the city. As an Emperor, even if Star Emperor didn't submit to the Fortune God dynasty, his status was still extremely noble. He could freely enter and exit these super cities, and didn't need to be checked like others, as long as his identity was verified. But as an Emperor level master, no one dared to pretend to be one. Otherwise, they would be courting death. When Star Emperor and Yi Shiwen disappeared into the city, an old man lying on a reclining chair opened his eyes in the shadow of the city gate. Beside him stood a young man. Write down that Star Emperor came today with a green-robed young man. He is suspected to be Yi Shiwen, whom Heavenly Taoism has been hunting recently. If this is true, there will be one more person on the list of people to pay special attention to in this city. Inform the little bastards to recognize people based on drawings. Don't provoke him, or else no one will collect their corpses when they die. The old man rambled on, and the young man next to him began to record everything the old man said into a jade slip. In the Fortune God dynasty, Emperors were extremely rare, but here they were very common. This was because this was the front line of the war in the Jade Outer Territory. In this stormy sea, there were many natural treasures that even emperors coveted. All of this was no longer strange. Master, don't we need to inform heavenly Taoisms? The young man asked cautiously. The old man opened his eyes and glanced at the young man. Then he said, "Why do we need to inform the heavenly Tao sect? We are not the disciples of the heavenly Tao sect, so we have no obligation to help them find people. Besides, we are the people of the divine imperial court. The fiercer these people fight, the better. In the past few years, these great sects have become more and more arrogant. Just remember one thing. Although the divine dynasty needs their strength to fight against the creatures of the outer realms, and many of these foreign sects are officials of the divine dynasty, it doesn't mean that we are on the same side as them. We have conflicts with them, but we also cooperate with them. You have to keep a good grasp of this. There are conflicts, but there are also cooperation. I understand." The young man nodded and said. The old man looked at the young man and said, "Boy, how can I not know what you are thinking? You like Fairy Tian Miao of Nine Nether Cult. Some time ago, there was news that Yi Shiwen took Fairy Tian Miao as his maid. You have been brooding about this for a long time." "Master, you already know," the young man said in a somewhat depressed tone. "You want to hide such an obvious matter from me? But I will teach you one more thing. Let's not talk about whether this matter is true or false. What can you do even if Yi Shiwen takes Fairy Tian Miao as his maid? To put it cruelly, who do you think you are? Do you think you are worthy of scheming against a person like him? You better get rid of this idea. Otherwise, you won't even know how you died. This old man doesn't want to collect your corpse." The old man looked at the youth and said with a serious expression, "As long as you don't become an emperor, you'll always be an ant. Even if you become an emperor one day, it's best that you don't have such thoughts." Even the Azura Saint Emperor couldn't stop him for long. "You're simply tired of living if you want to cause trouble for him." "Yes, master." The young man struggled for a moment, but eventually nodded. Chapter 3041. You don't have to look like you're unconvinced, because you don't have the qualifications. If he wanted to kill you, he could kill you 1,000,000 times with just a thought. The old man looked at his young disciple and said in a rare, serious tone, "How are you any different from an ant in front of him? Alas, you've had a smooth-sailing life these years. But it's also because of this that you've been too complacent. I don't have my skills now, and I haven't taught you how terrifying an emperor is. In front of an emperor, all worldly powers are a joke. I am a quasi-emperor." The young man couldn't help but talk back. "Quasi-emperor? What are quasi-emperors in front of emperors? Those who can escape from the hands of emperors are already praised for thousands of years. Why do you think that is?" The old man's expression became more and more serious as he said, "Didn't you receive the information from the Celestial Pole Island? Hundreds of heavenly Tao sects quasi-emperors only lasted a little longer than him. Isn't Bai Daozi stronger than you? In the end, he killed you easily even with a Tao tool. Moreover, he was seriously injured. You are too weak in front of him. Don't talk about Yi Shiwen. Even I can kill you effortlessly even if I'm not at my peak. Master, can't you beat him even at your peak?" The young man looked at the old man and asked, "At my peak? I don't know. I don't have the power I had in the past. I can't see through Yi Shiwen's strength now. I can only tell you that he is very strong. He is not weak among the emperors. No matter what ideas you have, you'd better put them away. You must be tired of living to plot against an emperor. The old man said seriously, "Also, help me send a message to the Heavenly Tao sect. Tell them that Yi Shiwen doesn't come from a big sect. It's best to rope him in, especially since he has offended Heavenly Tao sect. This is the best time to rope him in." The young man recorded all this in a jade slip. He couldn't help but ask, "Master, aren't you afraid that Heavenly Tao sect will be dissatisfied by roping in Yi Shiwen's?" The old man sneered. "Heavenly Tao sect will be dissatisfied? You are too naive. Let's see what they dare to do. Although the Heavenly Path sect is already the leader of many great sects, they are still outsiders. Compared to our divine dynasty, their strength is still too weak. Our divine dynasty has 4 great holy venerables to suppress all directions, and only Eastern Holy Venerate has the power of one domain. As long as he is willing to pay a certain price, he can suppress the Heavenly Path sect. You weren't even an ant when you faced Yi Shiwen because of the disparity in strength. Heavenly Tao couldn't stand up against my divine imperial court because of strength. This is the foundation of everything. Why would I guard the city gate if I didn't lose my strength? The old man lay down on the reclining chair and squinted his eyes. You've been looking at this for all these years? Strength is the foundation of everything in this world. Strength is the foundation of everything in this world. Strength, strength. The young man clenched his fists and looked in the direction where Yi Shiwen had disappeared. There was a bit of uneasiness in his eyes. Yi Shiwen followed the Star Emperor into the depths of the city. He didn't know the conversation between the master and disciple. After all, they were not in the myriad heavens. Otherwise, he would have sensed it the moment his name was mentioned. Heavenly secrets were in his grasp. The heavenly Tao of the Fortune God dynasty was even more unfathomable. Yi Shiwen couldn't control it to that extent with his current strength. However, this wasn't a bad thing. He couldn't control other people's heavenly secrets at any time and anywhere. Similarly, others couldn't control his heavenly secrets either. Otherwise, he would have been found by the heavenly Tao sect long ago. Under the guidance of the Star Emperor, they entered an inn. Yi Shiwen was a bit amazed that this inn seemed to be in the city. In fact, it was in the depths of a different space. Without an acquaintance to lead the way, one wouldn't even be able to find the entrance. There were many such buildings in this city. Many of them even existed in the form of microcosms. This city itself was very big. There were hundreds of millions of cultivators living in it. If these microcosms were added, the existence of the subspace would be even bigger. Along the way, the Star Emperor also mentioned that this storm city wasn't an ordinary city. Even among the many cities established by the Fortune Divine Dynasty, it could be ranked in the top 20. Since its establishment, it had never been breached. In fact, it had been besieged by many foreign emperor-level masters, but it had never fallen. Therefore, it had attracted more and more people to settle down in this city. The most important thing to survive in the outer domain was safety. Once the city was breached, it would be a massacre. Often, the people who could escape in the end were just a few. The others would be submerged in the endless army of ominous beasts and become the food of the ominous beasts. Usually in this storm city, this is our stronghold. Everyone has a room. It's a subspace. When the time comes, Taoism friend will also have a room, said the Star Emperor. Star Emperor, why did you bring someone else here? Not long after Yi Shiwen and Star Emperor entered the inn, suddenly, an interrogative voice came down. Fierce Ghost Emperor, this time I brought a newcomer, said the Star Emperor. A newcomer? Star Emperor, you know very well what kind of situation we are in. Under normal circumstances, we will not easily recruit newcomers, said the Fierce Ghost Emperor directly. I know, but the person I introduced is not an ordinary person. He should be able to help us, said the Star Emperor calmly. Can he help us? Suddenly, a figure appeared in front of the two. It was a middle-aged man dressed in an extremely ancient costume. It was unknown which era this costume belonged to. However, this man had a pair of horns on the top of his head. His face was ashen, as if it had been splashed with paint. His body exuded a little ghost aura, but it was different from the usual ghost aura. The ghost aura on his body was majestic and dignified. Yi Shiwen immediately saw that this was a ghost cultivator who had become an emperor. This was the first time that Yi Shiwen had seen a ghost emperor. There had never been a case of a ghost cultivator becoming an emperor in the myriad worlds. The most promising ghost emperor had been killed by an emperor lord. Since then, no ghost cultivator had been able to cultivate to that level. After the ghost cultivator became an emperor, the original gloomy nature changed and began to become majestic. This Taoism friend is a martial emperor, said the Star Emperor. Martial emperor? The Fierce Ghost Emperor glanced at Yi Shiwen. This title was not ordinary, and it was not something that ordinary people could afford. Compared to a title like the Fierce Ghost Emperor, It was undoubtedly several levels higher. While the fierce Ghost Emperor was looking at Yi Shiwen was also looking at him. It seemed that his cultivation was not shallow. Among the three people present, Yi Shiwen's cultivation seemed to be the highest. He had already entered the fourth realm. The Star Emperor and the fierce Ghost Emperor were both at the peak of the third realm. They were weaker than Yi Shiwen, who had not broken through. Because Yi Shiwen's strength was still above them, he could easily see their cultivation. No wonder they looked for him. The third realm was only the initial stage of the Emperor. If they attracted the attention of a powerful Emperor, the consequences would be unimaginable. It was not something they could resist at all. Since the Star Emperor introduced him, I won't say anything more. It's always good to have another helper. The fierce Ghost Emperor did not say anything in the end. They were all on the same level as the Emperor. No one was inferior to the other. He just entered a step earlier, so he was not qualified to say anything. Is there a newcomer? Then an old voice sounded. An old man with an old face and a stooped gait slowly walked down. Old Ginseng, I haven't seen you for many years. Your complexion is still very good. Congratulations, the Star Emperor said as he cupped his hands and secretly transmitted a message to Yi Shiwen. Only then did Yi Shiwen know that this old man with an old face was actually a 10-million-year-old Ginseng. Even he could not help but be moved. This kind of creature was born with heavenly treasures. It was very rare for them to be able to achieve Tao. It was even very difficult for them to survive. That was because heavenly treasures would inevitably cause countless people to fight over them. It was also a rare opportunity for it to be able to grow safely for tens of millions of years. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was a blessing. It was no wonder that it could achieve Tao in the end. Among these people, the old man's cultivation was clearly higher than the others. It seemed to be a bit more profound than Yi Shiwen, who had just entered the fourth realm. However, it was hard to say if they really fought. Yi Shiwen naturally did not call himself the Emperor for nothing. In terms of fighting methods, he was not afraid of anyone in the same realm. I'm old. The old man sighed. Among these people, he was the one who had cultivated for the longest time. It was not easy for heavenly treasures to achieve Tao. He had cultivated for tens of millions of years before he was born. He had experienced countless life and death tribulations to reach where he was today. Although Yi Shiwen could also be considered to have cultivated for a long time compared to the old man, he was not even a fraction of his age. Old Ginseng is very polite, Yi Shiwen said. Star Emperor, do you want to bring him in to replace the Feather Emperor? The old man asked. Yes, Martial Emperor has a profound cultivation and tyrannical combat strength. He should be able to replace the Feather Emperor and make up for the lack of combat strength caused by the Feather Emperor. The Star Emperor said, Fellow Star Emperor, may I know who this Feather Emperor is? Yi Shiwen secretly transmitted a message. The Feather Emperor was originally a member of our small group. Unfortunately, he encountered an Emperor-level creature in the outer domain and was seriously injured. He is now recuperating and will not recover for at least 100,000 years. However, we do not have that much time to wait for him to recover, so we asked you to join us, the Star Emperor said bluntly. Chapter 3042. In terms of the recovery ability of the Emperor realm, it might be a very serious injury in the eyes of ordinary people. However, for the Emperor realm lord, it could be recovered in a moment. If it was so serious that it would take 100,000 years to recover, then it would almost be regarded as a fatal injury. Didn't Yi Shiwen only spend more than 100 years to recover after being severely injured by Emperor Hunyuan Yuan? From this, it could be seen how dangerous it was in the outer domain. Even an Emperor Lord could be seriously injured or even killed. One of the main reasons why our matter has been delayed until now is that you Emperor was seriously injured and couldn't appear. However, with the addition of fellow Taoist Martial Emperor, we can make up for the lack of combat power of you Emperor. Star Emperor sighed. You Emperor's combat power was the strongest among them. It was a pity that he was seriously injured. Otherwise, their plan would have been carried out a long time ago. By the way, where is Dan Emperor? Star Emperor asked. Dan Emperor went to prepare other magical materials for alchemy. He should be back soon. Don't worry, everyone. Elderkin said. What is everyone gathered here for? Suddenly a figure jumped in. It was a man dressed in a royal robe. He had a graceful and luxurious temperament. Yi Shiwen instantly sensed him the moment he walked in. This was because this man had a somewhat familiar aura. The martial arts he learned clearly came from the same source. Countless years flashed in Yi Shiwen's mind. He was very familiar with the name Dan Emperor. He once broke into the divine Dan realm and obtained great benefits. Dan Emperor was the eldest disciple of Dan Emperor. He was also the strongest one. In the end, he betrayed Dan Emperor and was killed by Dan Emperor himself. Dan Emperor quickly noticed Yi Shiwen's existence. He also sensed that Yi Shiwen's martial arts were somewhat familiar, just like Yi Shiwen had sensed it. However, he didn't say much. He just asked, "This is Martial Emperor. I invited him to replace the lack of combat power of you Emperor." Star Emperor said quickly, "I see. Greetings, fellow Taoist Martial Emperor." Dan Emperor bowed slightly. Yi Shiwen also bowed in return. Although both of them had some speculations in their hearts, they didn't say it out loud. Since everyone is here, we can consider heading to the outer realm, Elderkin said. Everyone's expression was somewhat grave. In reality, this was not an easy task. A place that required 5 sovereign emperors to gather was obviously very dangerous. Yes, it's time to think about it. Everything has been prepared. Once we get the last main ingredient, everything will be perfect. Dinda nodded. I wonder what the final main ingredient is? Yi Shiwen asked. Star Sovereign. Haven't you told Taoist Martial Emperor yet? Ken Elder asked as he glanced at the Star Sovereign. Star Emperor shook his head. However, the crowd could understand. Under such circumstances, they had to be as cautious as possible. Once the news spread, the consequences would be unimaginable. No one knew how many experts it would attract. You can say it now. We're about to set off anyway, so let me say it. Dinda glanced at Yi Shiwen indifferently. The last main ingredient is something called phaseless spirit bone. This thing only appears after the death of some extremely powerful Emperor-level creatures. Yi Shiwen's pupils slightly contracted. The so-called Emperor-level creatures were the powerhouses of sovereign Emperor level in the Outer Realm. They could also be regarded as extremely tyrannical creatures. However, they were different from sovereign emperors. These extremely powerful creatures didn't cultivate the principles like many sovereign emperors. Instead, they had innate magical powers. They slowly cultivated their magical powers, and as long as there was a certain opportunity, they could transform into Emperor-level creatures. These terrifying Emperor-level creatures had formidable destructive power and fighting strength comparable to sovereign emperors. However, they didn't have the ability to cultivate the principles. Therefore, these people couldn't get rid of the shackles of the principles. The most fatal point was that their lifespan was limited. Although their lifespan was very long because of their unparalleled cultivation, it was as if there was no limit. However, in fact, their lifespan still had an end. Even the most powerful Emperor-level creatures couldn't escape the road of death. They would still die after living for millions of years. This was also the most important reason why the Fortune God dynasty could maintain a balance with the Outer Realm creatures. Whether these Emperor-level creatures were killed or not, they would naturally die of old age. Although this process would take a long time, they would still die in the end. In contrast, the sovereign emperors of the Fortune God dynasty could live forever as long as they weren't killed or seriously injured. Their strength would grow stronger and stronger. This was the fundamental reason why the Fortune God dynasty could suppress the Outer Realm. However, even so, those Emperor-level creatures that could automatically cultivate to the Sovereign Emperor level with their own bloodline were still unimaginably terrifying. However, as a Sovereign Emperor, Dinda had enough capital to challenge those Emperor-level creatures. In fact, he was even stronger than them. Dinda used the word extremely powerful to describe the Emperor-level creatures that could leave behind phaseless spirit bone. How strong were they? How strong? Yi Shiwen asked. It may be the 9th realm, or even more powerful Emperor-level creatures that can only be born after they pass away. Therefore, this phaseless spirit bone is very difficult to find. The clans that possess the phaseless spirit bone, without exception, are all extremely powerful behemoths comparable to super sects. Dinda said. Everyone's expression became a little dignified. What kind of concept was comparable to super sects? Heavenly Taoism was a super sect, and Nine Nether Holy Cult was a super sect. Compared to these super sects, the Constellation sect founded by the Star Emperor was considered powerful, but it wasn't worth mentioning. And the phaseless spirit bone could only be left behind by the Ninth Realm or even more powerful Emperor-level creatures after they passed away. Without exception, it was of utmost importance. It was a peerless treasure that was closely guarded by all the forces. If they wanted to get their hands on it, it would be no less difficult than breaking into the Heavenly Taoism sect to make a scene and snatch the faceless spiritual bone away. At this time, Yishuan finally understood why they hadn't taken any action for so many years. Although they knew the Dan recipe, it wasn't easy to find the main ingredient. There was no replicability at all. Being able to succeed even once was already a stroke of luck. Even if the person who took action was an Emperor-level master, it was no exception. Then, what do you plan to do this time? Yishuan asked. It's very simple. After many years of investigation, we found a clan, the sky-devouring ominous Python clan. This clan is also considered as an overlord in the Stormy Sea region. They once had an ancestor of the Ninth Realm. After that ancestor passed away, there hasn't been another expert of that level. Although there are a few experts in the clan, they are far from what they used to be. If there's hope, then this might be the most promising one. Dinda said, you plan to break into the sky-devouring ominous Python clan and seize the phaseless spirit bone? Yishuan couldn't help but be slightly surprised by this bold plan. This was indeed not a decision that an ordinary person could make. Yes, this is the only way. If we can't gather the last main ingredient, then our hopes will be dashed. Dinda nodded. Elder Kin was the strongest among these people. He had the strength of the peak of the Fourth Realm, followed by Dan Di and Yishuan. Both of them had surpassed the Fourth Realm. Everyone else had the strength of the Third Realm. However, Dan Di was actually the leader. That was because he had the elixir recipe. Even the many divine materials needed for the elixir recipe were gathered by him. His words were very useful in this small group. It was very difficult to advance to the Emperor level. The advancement of each realm was like ascending to the heavens. This was the fundamental reason why everyone was willing to spend tens of thousands of years to prepare. Yishuan's progress speed was already like a miracle among the many Emperor-level masters. Dinda had attained the heavenly Taoism many years earlier than Yishuan in the myriad heavens. However, Yishuan had already caught up to his current cultivation. From this, it could be imagined how abnormal Yishuan's current cultivation speed was. No matter what, although there are risks, we still have to give it a try. Ominous Ghost Emperor said with a dignified expression. Compared to Old Kan, Yishuan, and Dinda, he needed to cultivate from the Third Realm to the Fourth Realm. It was a completely different realm. It was needless to say how difficult it was. Even Yishuan had prepared for so many years. Therefore, among these people, only he and Star Emperor were the most eager to refine the Dan. Now that I've told you the risks, what do you think? Dindy asked. At this moment, everyone's eyes turned to Yishuan. After hearing such an important matter, they naturally couldn't let Yishuan leave so easily. Count me in. Yishuan agreed immediately. Even without everyone's invisible threat, he still had to do it. The more he cultivated, the more he could feel the difficulty of cultivation. He didn't know how long it would take for him to reach the Fifth Realm with normal cultivation. This didn't fit with his plan. Good, Taoist Martial Emperor is really straightforward, Star Emperor said with a loud laugh. Well, in that case, please go and prepare, Taoist Martial Emperor. We will set off soon. Oldkin said. Okay. Yishuan was about to go to the room prepared for him in this inn. Suddenly, Dinda's voice came from behind. Taoist Martial Emperor. Please wait. It was transmitted through secret sound transmission. Obviously, Dinda didn't want others to know about this matter. Yishuan remained calm and quickly entered the room reserved for him. After a while, Dinda's figure appeared. However, it was just a divine sense clone. Chapter 3043. What's the matter, Alchemy Emperor Fellow? Yishuan asked. Alchemy Emperor Fellow, let's get straight to the point. If I'm not mistaken, Alchemy Emperor Fellow should be from the myriad heavens. Alchemy Emperor said slowly. There was another small dimension in the room of this inn. The range was very wide, and the defensive measures were excellent. Even an emperor couldn't hear what was being said inside. Moreover, Alchemy Emperor came quietly, so he didn't alarm anyone. That's right, if I'm not mistaken, Alchemy Emperor Fellow should be the only legendary Alchemy Emperor who advanced through alchemy, Yishuan said slowly. Although Alchemy Emperor was a senior to him, they were now on equal footing. It was enough for him to maintain sufficient respect for Alchemy Emperor. Legend? Have I finally become a legend? Alchemy Emperor's mouth flashed a helpless smile. Even an emperor can't be glorious throughout the ages. I should be grateful that someone remembers me. Alchemy Emperor Fellow established the alchemy lineage in the myriad heavens. I don't know how many people have left behind, so it's natural for you to be remembered. Yishuan said. In the universe, not all sovereign emperors were remembered by people. They had to have made great contributions. For a sovereign emperor to be remembered, it was definitely not only because of his unparalleled achievements. Most importantly, it was because he decided to spread martial arts to many commoners, allowing the power of the human race to recover. His name was also praised for eternity. Alchemy Emperor was the same. He established the alchemy lineage so that the alchemy practitioners could be compared with many other martial arts. He established a supreme path. So as long as the alchemy lineage was not destroyed, his prestige could be praised for eternity. In the myriad heavens, perhaps my Tao is considered unique, but in this fortune realm, it's not necessarily so. Alchemy Emperor said. In the myriad heavens and realms, the heavenly Tao did not allow different people to prove their Tao with the same Tao. This was also why no one after the Pill Emperor could become an emperor through the Pill Tao. However, in the fortune realm, it was a completely different situation. The heavenly Tao of the fortune realm was of a higher level than the heavenly Tao of the myriad heavens and realms. It could actually allow similar Tao of emperors to coexist. In other words, it was just as Yishuan had guessed at the beginning. All the great ways had been opened up by people one after another. That was why there were countless people who could prove their Tao and become gods. But only a few people could become emperors. Because the path to godhood had already been opened by countless people could automatically become emperors by following this path. However, the paths of the Empyreans were intermittent. Every path was a steep mountain path. Those Empyreans might be able to make it through due to their personal circumstances and walk very far, but that was only them alone. They did not open up a path that was easy for their descendants to traverse. This was also why the number of Empyreans was always so small. However, in the Fortune Divine Dynasty, even Empyreans were not a small number. Some of the paths of Empyreans had already been opened up repeatedly, opening up a path that was simply unimaginable to people in the Fortune realm. Just like the tribes that had produced Emperor-level masters, they were able to produce them continuously because their paths had been truly opened up. They did not need to worry about the problems of ordinary Empyreans during their cultivation. After all, even with Yishuan's current cultivation, it was impossible for him to dictate the cultivation path of others. It was impossible for him to pave the way for others and open up a path for them. This principle was the same. After entering the fortune realm, I realized that I had really underestimated the heroes of the world. The truly glorious world is not limited to the myriad heavens and realms. Alchemy Emperor said with a faint smile. There was a hint of self-deprecation in his expression. One must know that the blow that could make an Empyrean show such an expression could not be described with just a little bit. So, apart from the myriad heavens and the fortune realm, there are other worlds? Yishuan suddenly became spirited and asked. Yes, in the beginning, I thought that the myriad heavens and realms was the limit of everything. Then, I thought that the fortune realm was everything. Later, I gradually realized that the fortune realm is the ultimate plane of many worlds, but it is not just a subordinate plane like the myriad heavens and realms. The myriad heavens and realms is only one of its many subordinate planes. Alchemy Emperor said with a smile. It seems that the martial emperor has not been here for a long time. So many years have passed, and the heavenly Tao of the myriad heavens and realms seems to have been imprisoned. No more Empyrean emperors have been born, let alone old friends from my hometown. That's impossible. Could it be that fellow Taoist has never seen the Qin Emperor? Yi Shiwen asked. The Qin Emperor? Alchemy Emperor frowned slightly and said, I've never seen the great Qin Emperor before. The Fortune Divine dynasty is simply too big. Not to mention, there are other foreign domains no smaller than the Fortune Divine dynasty. The probability of us meeting him is not very high, so I've never seen him before. Listening to fellow Taoist's words, the great Qin Emperor must be an extraordinary character. Yi Shiwen paused and told him about the current situation of the myriad heavens and the development and changes of the myriad heavens and realms after Alchemy Emperor left. I see. I didn't expect the Qin Emperor to be such a great person. According to what you said, if he was not injured by Emperor Primordial Chaos, we would have met sooner or later. Alchemy Emperor was a little frightened after listening to Yi Shiwen. Too many things had happened in the myriad heavens and realms after he left. He left after the Second War of Resistance against the heavens, and the Qin Emperor became the emperor many years later. So, the two of them actually did not meet each other. However, just listening to Yi Shiwen's rough description, Alchemy Emperor could feel that the amazing human was actually able to tear the heaven shackles of the myriad heavens and realms, crushing the many emperors who besieged him during the shackles period and became the emperor. Alchemy Emperor hated it. If the heaven shackles were shackled, what kind of situation would it be? So he admired Yi Shiwen even more. If it was him, there was no way he could do it. The Qin Emperor was indeed an extraordinary person. Compared with the Qin Emperor, Yi Shiwen was not even the first person to tear the shackles. However, that was not important. Yi Shiwen also tore the shackles period and became the emperor. In the end, he even defeated the Tian clan. Alchemy Emperor, who became the emperor during the Second War of Resistance against the heavens, was very clear about how fierce and terrifying the legendary Tian clan was. Even so, they were driven back by Yi Shiwen in the end. This Yi Shiwen was not an ordinary person. Fellow Taoist's role in the myriad heavens and realms should be far above me. Without fellow Taoist, the orthodoxy of the myriad heavens and realms would be severed. Alchemy Emperor said slowly, I was forced to do it. It's not a big deal, Yi Shiwen said with a faint smile. You don't have to be so polite, fellow Taoist. Being able to do this is indeed extraordinary. It's my honor to know fellow Taoist. Alchemy Emperor laughed heartily and said. Alchemy Emperor didn't wait for Yi Shiwen to continue speaking and said, I didn't intend to say it at first. However, since fellow Taoist has also become an emperor in the myriad heavens and realms, we can be considered to be from the same hometown. So, I'll mention it to you. Fellow Taoist Emperor, if I'm not mistaken, I'm afraid that you're the Yi Shiwen who has offended the heavenly Taoism. It's indeed me, Yi Shiwen said with a wry smile on the corner of his mouth. That's right. Fellow Taoist is indeed a peerless hero. You dared to go against the heavenly Taoism, Alchemy Emperor said with a smile. Taoist friend, don't tease me. I just happened to be at the right time. I wouldn't have wanted to have a conflict with the heavenly Taoists if they weren't so aggressive. Yi Shiwen said with a bitter smile. That is indeed the case. The heavenly Taoism is almost the #1 sect in the world. Naturally, they are extremely domineering when they do things. Others are simply no match for them. It is indeed admirable that you dared to offend them. Alchemy Emperor said with a smile. However, you are gravely mistaken if you think that your troubles will end here. On the contrary, your troubles have just begun. I heard someone mention this when I was gathering herbs outside. This time, the heavenly Taoism sect has even dispatched a small big shot in order to kill you. They forcibly awakened this small big shot from his closed-door training. Now, they are looking for you all over the world. Stormwind City is the front line of the resistance against the foreign domains. However, the heavenly Taoism sect still has many spies here. Therefore, I'm afraid that your whereabouts won't be concealed for long. Therefore, you won't be able to escape from us even if you don't want to. Yishuan nodded with a dignified look on his face. Indeed, he had already thought about all of this. It was impossible for the Heavenly Taoism sect to leave the matter at that. Perhaps there would be spies of the Heavenly Taoism sect as long as there were people around. Moreover, he hadn't been secretive when he had come here. So, it was only a matter of time before he was discovered. However, the intelligence of the Alchemy Emperor had made him instantly vigilant. Who could be called a small big shot among the Emperors? Only the top experts of the 7th realm or above would have such qualifications. And they wouldn't be a small big shot if they were to cultivate to the 9th realm. Instead, they would be a giant and peerless existence. However, even so, the small big shot of the Heavenly Taoism sect was still much more tyrannical than Yishuan. It was just as the Alchemy Emperor had said. The Heavenly Taoism sect had paid a huge price in order to hunt down Yishuan. They wanted to kill him as soon as possible. This time, it was obvious that the Heavenly Taoism sect had regarded him as a thorn in their side. They couldn't wait to kill him as soon as possible. It felt like killing a chicken with a butcher's knife. He would lose a layer of skin even if he didn't die if he were to stay and fight against the small big shot of the Heavenly Taoism sect. Yishuan had no other choice but to leave with the Alchemy Emperor and the others at this time. Chapter 3044. Previously, Yishuan's whereabouts were uncertain. Once Yishuan's whereabouts were determined, there would be a thunderous attack waiting for him. Yishuan must make all preparations before that. Fortunately, he was not a pushover. Since he had already entered the 4th realm, not everyone could deal with him. The arrow is already on the bowstring. It has to be released. If they want to kill me, it will depend on whether they have such good teeth or not. Yishuan slightly sneered, but no matter what, I still want to thank you for the information you provided. This is nothing. When fellow Daoist stays in this world for a long time, you will naturally have your own sources of information. Even the Fortune God Dynasty might be able to provide you with information. Dan Emperor said with a faint smile. Fortune God Dynasty? Yishuan whispered. That's right, the Fortune God Dynasty is quite wary of a colossus like the Heavenly Tao sect. With fellow Daoist strength, you already have the qualifications to be roped in. Who knows, maybe someone from the Heavenly Tao sect will come to rope you in, Dan Emperor said. Yishuan's eyes lit up. He looked at Dendi and asked, I don't know if I can ask, but why? I didn't join the Fortune God Dynasty. Although joining the Fortune God Dynasty is a lot more convenient, there are also a lot of restrictions. I can't be as free as I am now. I am a supreme existence in the heavens. How can I become someone else's subordinate after coming here? Dennis shook his head and said with a smile, This is a kind of obsession. It is also a kind of Tao barrier. The Dan Emperor shook his head with a smile and said, This is a kind of obsession and also a kind of Tao barrier. In fact, it's not just me. There are many Emperor monarchs who are the same. Those natives who were born and raised in the Fortune God Dynasty were born with the supreme majesty of the Fortune God Dynasty since young, so they might not reject it. But those of us who came from other worlds, without exception, are invincible, sweeping through the world, and finally becoming the Emperor monarch of a world. How could we be willing to be under others? This is a hurdle that we can't cross. Yishuan nodded. So, that was how it was. However, he didn't care about it in his heart. The Fortune God Dynasty was powerful and unparalleled. However, it didn't mean that they would humiliate the emperors. Once they joined the Fortune God Dynasty, they would have to obey their orders. However, they didn't have to turn the emperors into slaves. Otherwise, who would be willing to join the Fortune God Dynasty and suffer? It was said that in the early years, the Fortune Divine Dynasty placed great restrictions on the emperor monarchs from other worlds, and their requirements were extremely harsh. After arriving at the Fortune world, they had to serve the Fortune Divine Dynasty, and there were no other options. Unless they defected and fled to the outer domain. Later, the rise of many large sects gave many emperors a chance to catch a breather. They were able to strike a balance between the two sides and did not have to sell themselves to the Fortune Divine Dynasty. Therefore, These idle emperor-emperors often held a neutral view towards the conflict between the Fortune Divine dynasty and the large sections. They would not side with either side, because they were very clear that no matter which side won, it would be a great threat to them. So, there should be a lot of foreign emperor-emperors, right? Yishuan asked. Almost half and half. The native emperor-emperors of the Fortune God dynasty occupy half, and the emperor-emperors from other worlds like us occupy the other half. It can be considered as an equal share. Emperor-emperors from other worlds like us have achieved a very high status, whether it is among the large sects or the Fortune God dynasty. Even the founders of some super large sects are super experts from other worlds. Dan Emperor nodded and said, in the early days, there was a huge conflict between us outsiders and the native emperor-emperors. Later, because of the pressure from the outer domain, we reluctantly came together and slowly integrated. Especially after the rise of many large sects, all parties are trying to recruit talents, regardless of whether they are natives or people from other worlds. This slowly formed the current situation, where the status of the emperor-emperors is supreme. Daoist friend is saying that there are people from other worlds who have established super large sects, and there are also people who hold high positions in the Fortune God dynasty. I wonder if there are such people in the myriad heavens? Yishuan asked. Speaking of this, Dan Emperor couldn't help but smile bitterly and said, as far as I know, there shouldn't be. We come from other worlds, so we tend to be very united and help each other. Because in any world, it is often very rare to cultivate to the emperor-emperor realm. Only the emperor-emperors, or even the best among the emperor-emperors, can pass through the layers of barriers to come to the Fortune God realm. In total, there are only a few people from the same hometown. As long as their relationship isn't very bad, they will often take care of each other. If there is such a person in the myriad heavens, as long as he opens his mouth, even the heavenly Taoism will have to give him face, and Daoist friend's crisis will be conveniently resolved. Yishuan thought about it. It was indeed so. As far as he knew, many famous emperor-emperors in the myriad heavens had directly fallen in the battle between each other, and some of them had failed to come to the Fortune God realm because of the surprise attack of the primordial origin emperor on the road of fortune. In the end, there were undoubtedly only a few people who could come here. Although he firmly believed that Emperor Qin must have come, he couldn't even find a trace of Emperor Qin now. Could such an amazing person be drowned in the crowd in the Fortune God realm? He didn't believe it. There must be something that he didn't know. But it doesn't matter. For us cultivators, it is better to rely on ourselves than relying on heaven and earth. Even if the heavenly Taoism wants to kill me, they will have to see if they have the ability to do so. Yishuan said, Daoist friend is really an extraordinary person. Dan Emperor couldn't help but look at Yishuan in a new light. Facing the encirclement and pursuit of a colossus like the heavenly Taoism, he still had such confidence. Sure enough, those who could cultivate to this stage since ancient times were not ordinary people. He had become an emperor through alchemy. In terms of combat power, he was actually inferior to Yishuan. After all, everyone had their own strengths. In terms of alchemy, although these emperor-emperors also knew a little, they were undoubtedly not on the same level as him. By the way, Daoist friend Dan Emperor, please forgive me for being presumptuous. I would like to ask if you can sell this elixir recipe to me. Yishuan thought of something and asked, what's so difficult about that? I will give it to you directly. In fact, I won't hide it from you. The biggest difficulty of this elixir isn't in deducing its recipe. Instead, it's very difficult to find the ingredients even if the recipe is deduced. For example, the phaseless spirit bone isn't something that people of my level can come into contact with. And those who are qualified to come into contact with this elixir actually don't have much need for it. Dan Emperor said straightforwardly. Yishuan nodded. This elixir was only useful for emperor-emperors below the 7th realm. However, how many emperor-emperors below the 7th realm could obtain this phaseless spirit bone? Dan Emperor didn't say anything after he finished speaking. He produced a jade slip out of thin air and handed it over to Yishuan. Yishuan probed it with his divine sense and came to know that this pill was called Tai-E Soul Condensation Pill. It was an extremely high-quality pill. The main ingredient was very difficult to find, Moreover, there were more than 10,000 kinds of medicinal ingredients required to concoct this pill. It was enough to make one dizzy. Moreover, each of them was a priceless heavenly treasure. Any kind of heavenly treasure was indeed a trifle for an Emperor realm expert. However, when tens of thousands of medicinal ingredients were to be found, it would require a huge amount of expenses. Even for emperors, there was a feeling that they would definitely have to spend a lot of money. It could be seen how difficult it was to improve the emperor realm. Many emperors were super geniuses who treated cultivation as simple as eating and drinking before they became emperors. It was as easy as flipping their hands to challenge those above their level. However, all this changed after entering the emperor realm. It was extremely difficult. Every step forward was extremely difficult. These invincible geniuses in the past had no choice but to do everything possible to make a breakthrough. Just closed-door cultivation alone required too much time. At this time, the disparity between having a super force backing them and relying on the Fortune Divine Dynasty was obvious. Whether it was the Fortune Divine Dynasty or a super force, they had countless subordinates and disciples that collected all kinds of divine materials for them. Even though they were also restricted, their cultivation speed was incomparable to the Fortune Divine Dynasty's super forces. It could be said that each had its own advantages and disadvantages. It depended on each person's choice. This elixir formula is one of the rewards for helping me this time, Dan Emperor said. Of course, he knew that the real reward was the elixir. Compared to that, this elixir formula was nothing. Of course, for those super sects or the Fortune God Dynasty, this elixir formula was still very valuable. However, for idle emperors like them, it was a little useless. Yi Shiwen received the elixir formula and left a way to contact each other. Although they could not be considered as close allies from now on, compared to ordinary people, they would undoubtedly be closer. In the future, they could also help each other in some matters. The two talked a little more, especially for Yi Shiwen. He had just arrived in the fortune world and did not understand the current situation. What he learned from Fairy Jiangzhu and Fairy Tian Miao was on a completely different level from what he learned from Dan Emperor, an emperor level expert. Although Fairy Tian Miao came from a super sect, there was no way for her to know more about the inside story of an emperor because a quasi-emperor was just a quasi-emperor. This conversation was also very important for Yi Shiwen, especially about some common knowledge about the outer domain. There were some basic things that Yi Shiwen needed to understand. After understanding these things, Yi Shiwen already had a certain understanding of the current situation. So, he wasn't completely clueless about what was going on. As the two of them chatted, the day of departure arrived. Chapter 3045. In the base of heavenly Taoism, a figure was sitting cross-legged in the clouds in an extremely majestic small plane that looked like an ancient world. All the laws between heaven and earth froze at this moment and twined around this figure. They were constantly patrolling along with this figure's breathing. It was very terrifying. Suddenly, a stream of light broke through everything and fell into that figure on the spot. After a while, that figure opened his eyes. When he opened his eyes, it was as if the world was being created. The laws between heaven and earth suddenly became active. He was like the legendary god of creation. When he opened his eyes, the world was daytime. When he closed his eyes, the world was dark. The entire world revolved around him. As Yi Shiwen appeared, it seems that it's finally my turn to move my muscles. A deep and dull voice came from that figure. As soon as his voice fell, his figure disappeared without a trace. However, the truly terrifying thing was that as his figure disappeared, the entire world seemed to have entered doomsday. It began to collapse on the spot. Countless laws collapsed. The world and space also completely collapsed with the departure of that figure. This was not a naturally formed world. It was merely a world that was automatically constructed by many laws when he was comprehending the Great Path. One could imagine how powerful this person's cultivation was. It had reached an unimaginable level. It could be said that his martial arts were unparalleled. Yi Shiwen, obediently accept your death. Many emperors did not have much time to prepare, especially since Yi Shiwen was being hunted by heavenly Taoism. Therefore, it was time to set off after only 3 days. Several emperors gathered in the lobby downstairs of the inn. Ordinary people would not have imagined that so many emperors would gather in this seemingly ordinary inn. It could be considered a grand scene. Everyone, are you all ready? Alchemy Emperor was the last to come down. His real body had been preparing. Yes, it's ready. Everyone nodded with a solemn expression. Well, let's go. All of them were emperors. Their movement techniques were unbelievably fast. Even if they could not tear the space casually in Storm City, it was enough. In just a few breaths, they had already left Storm City. Walla! Everywhere, there were waves as tall as the sky. And in the distance, there were countless demon beasts forming a terrifying hurricane. This was the extremely harsh living environment of the outer domain Stormy Sea region, and this was just the beginning of the environment. Dan Emperor had also explained the situation to Yi Shiwen in the past few days. The heaven-devouring ominous Python clan resided in the depths of the Stormy Sea region. They were the hegemons of a region. They were tyrannical and tyrannical. Even an ordinary emperor wouldn't dare to approach that place. Otherwise, they would be besieged by the emperor-level creatures. Before entering the sky-devouring ominous Python's territory, you can attack at will. However, once you enter the territory, you will have to be careful. You must be careful. We plan to infiltrate this time. If we are discovered, the consequences will be unimaginable. Elderkin glanced at the various sovereign emperors as he spoke. Amongst these sovereign emperors, he was the most senior. Thus, he was also the most qualified to say such words. Understood. After everyone finished speaking, beams of light appeared under their feet, and they finally disappeared from the vast surface of the sea. They had used their great powers to forcefully open up a path. Those who were hit along the way would be smashed into pieces on the spot. Apart from emperor-level creatures, these creatures from the outer domain were nothing to the many sovereign emperors. A moment after everyone disappeared, a silhouette slowly appeared in the void. The aura around him was so dense that it seemed to have solidified. It formed a super-domain around him. Under the terrifying aura that he emitted, no ferocious beasts dared to come near him. Otherwise, they would really be courting death. Go. Ha. You will all be my wedding gown in the end. That person's voice was a bit hoarse, and his expression was a bit ferocious. After waiting for a while, that person directly followed the direction in which everyone had left. His speed was also unparalleled. He was also an expert of the emperor level. Yi Shiwen and the others had just entered the Stormy Sea region of the outer region. Suddenly, they saw countless storms sweeping in the distance. These storms were incomparably violent, forming extremely terrifying whirlpools on the surface of the sea. The water whirlpools tore through the void and tore the sky into pieces. They swept up countless ferocious beasts in the water and made their home here. It was unknown how many terrifying creatures were being nurtured in this Stormy Sea region. These storms seemed to be driven by some kind of law and some kind of power. They rushed towards everyone. How dare they? No one panicked. With their eyesight, they could easily tell that these storms were being controlled by the beings from the other realms. They were rushing towards them to kill them. Yi Shiwen and the others were all peerless emperor-level experts. Their vitality was even more powerful to an unimaginable extent. Even if they only released a little bit of it, it was like a beacon in this Stormy Sea region. It attracted countless powerful creatures from the outer region to attack them. This was the first time Yi Shiwen fought in the outer region. However, he was also secretly surprised by the ferocity of these creatures from the outer region. Emperor-level experts were not only supreme existences in the Fortune Divine dynasty. Even in the outer region, those emperor-level experts were also high and mighty. They ruled over a region of the world. Ordinary creatures would not dare to attack an emperor-level expert, let alone a group of emperor-level experts. It was not an exaggeration to describe these creatures from the outer region as daring. They were extremely arrogant. After a while, Everyone was surrounded by endless storms. These storms were the nests of the creatures from the outer region. No one knew how many creatures from the outer region were being nurtured in these storms. They were so densely packed that they filled the sky. They rushed towards Yi Shiwen and the others like locusts, blotting out the sky and covering the earth. All sorts of tyrannical divine abilities erupted in an instant. Most of these alien creatures were ferocious beasts that did not fear death. However, there were also some intelligent creatures among them. Under the command of these intelligent alien creatures, the ferocious beasts erupted with formidable combat power. They instantly formed a towering formation, using the formation to resist and destroy the emperor monarchs. This was also the only way to defeat a sovereign emperor. If it was a sovereign emperor who had just become a sovereign emperor, it was possible that he would fail miserably and be killed by these foreign creatures. Then his flesh and blood would be devoured completely. These ferocious beasts weren't afraid of death, and once they successfully devoured an imperial monarch, they would be able to forge an incomparably glorious race. An imperial monarch's entire body was a divine material of great nourishment, and it wasn't something that other treasures of heaven and earth could compare to. The first to rush over was a group of fierce beasts. These fierce beasts were jet black in color. They were dozens of feet long. The color of their bodies was almost the same as the color of the sea. They did not attack from the sky. Instead, they directly swooped up from the sea and rushed towards Yi Shiwen and the others. Their first attack was a magical power that combined water and wind attributes. One or two of these fierce beasts were nothing. However, the magical power formed by countless of these fierce beasts was enough to topple mountains and overturn seas. The strength of these fierce beasts was extremely powerful. Even a seasoned quasi-emperor wouldn't be able to withstand their first wave of attack. They would be completely annihilated. Everyone spread out and kill these beasts. Although each of these beasts is not worth much, they can be sold for some price if they are added up. Oldkin said, these creatures from the outer region were essential materials for many people in the Fortune Divine dynasty to refine pills and forge weapons. However, ordinary people had no way of hunting such fierce beasts. Therefore, the price of these materials from the bodies of these creatures was very high in the Fortune Divine dynasty. However, this high price was only relative to those below the Emperor realm. For the Emperor realm, it was only considered not bad. Yi Shiwen also rushed forward when he heard this. The Taiyu sword in his hand slashed out, forming the power of the Taiyu sword. It swept out in all directions and tore apart everything. Over 1,000 fierce beasts were killed on the spot. The magical power formation that they had created was also torn apart by Yi Shiwen's Taiyu sword. Without the protection of the formation, these people were just lambs waiting to be slaughtered. Most of them were killed in an instant. They instantly turned into a mist of blood that filled the sky. Yi Shiwen didn't intend to leave the corpses of these vicious birds intact. All the blood essence of their bodies had been absorbed by Yi Shiwen. Although this blood essence was better than nothing for an Emperor Realm expert, he might be able to extract a drop of useful blood essence from hundreds of them. However, for the current Yi Shiwen, it was naturally better than nothing. However, it was a pity that it would be much better if there was an Emperor Realm creature. No matter how many of these foreign creatures he killed, it would not be as useful as killing a supreme Emperor Realm creature. Yi Shiwen swept the Taiyu sword, and the others also unleashed their respective magical powers. Even if they were said to be not good at fighting, it was only when compared to those in the same realm. When it came to these ants below the Sovereign Emperor realm, they could absolutely sweep them away without any difficulty. More and more storms surrounded them, and the number of creatures from the outer realm increased as well. None of them had the intention to continue fighting. They all knew very well why they had come here. Therefore, they didn't need to be reminded to know that they had come here. They killed their way through the territory of the ominous sky-devouring python. Although these foreign creatures gathered more and more, they were not a match for Yi Shiwen and the others. They swept away. Chapter 3046. Boom! Yi Shiwen was like a rampaging Tyrannosaurus Rex, constantly killing in the sea. Although the ferocious beasts in the sea were tyrannical, they were no match for the attacks of several emperors. The further they went into the stormy sea area, the more ferocious beasts and creatures there were. These ferocious beasts didn't just attack the outsiders, they also attacked and killed each other for survival, to fight for territory, to fight for living space. It could be said that countless ferocious beasts died at every moment, and countless ferocious beasts were born. It was an exceptionally cruel scene. The ominous beasts that were hit by Yi Shiwen turned into blobs of blood on the spot. These blobs of blood attracted even more ominous beasts to spy on them. Yi Shiwen kept swinging the Taiyu sword in his hand, as if he would never tire. Elder Kan and the others couldn't help but be secretly startled as they saw Yi Shiwen's massacre. Yi Shiwen had been like a vanguard along the way. He had been killing nonstop. However, the speed of his flying light wasn't any slower than theirs. He had been killing nonstop while keeping up with their speed. Everyone was secretly startled by the level of his strength. In a day's time, these people had already gone many miles into the stormy sea region. They just kept killing. The deeper they went, the more tyrannical the ominous beasts became. In the beginning, there were only ominous beasts at the Dao confirmation level. Later on, even a random clan would have many quasi-emperor level experts. They could even faintly sense the aura of some emperor-level life forms in the depths of the void. However, it was obvious that these emperor-rank existences were wary of these people, not daring to make a move. After all, emperor-rank existences were not just fierce beasts, but also possessed astonishing intelligence. Moreover, among the emperor-rank existences, there were some who could abolish their cultivation and start from scratch. What they practiced were the Fortune Divine Dynasty's cultivators' martial techniques, comprehending the laws of the world, and achieving transcendence, achieving the goal of immortality. Among the emperor-level life forms, there were some old antiques that had lived for countless years. Although it was rare for them to strip off their cultivation and start from scratch, these emperor-level life forms had accumulated a lot over the years. The first thing the Fortune Divine Dynasty's experts would do upon encountering these emperor-rank creatures was to kill them. They absolutely could not be allowed to grow, otherwise they would become a great threat to the Fortune Divine Dynasty. Everyone, we are now deep into the stormy sea region. When we make our move, try to make as little noise as possible. Start hiding your aura. Get ready. He had been to the stormy sea region more than once, so he was very clear about his current location. This was already a very deep place in the stormy sea region. The clans that could survive here were all super clans without exception. They possessed astonishing strength that ordinary people could not imagine. Otherwise, they would have been devoured by other clans long ago. Everyone nodded and worked together. It was no longer Yi Shiwen attacking alone. With several sovereign emperors working together, it was naturally very easy for them to hide their auras. Walalala! At this time, incomparably powerful spatial storms had appeared in the sky. These storms seemed to have been blown out from the depths of space. They tore the space apart and wreaked havoc on the sea surface. Many fierce beasts couldn't react in time and were swept into these spatial storms. They were shredded to death on the spot. As for those powerful tribes, formations rose one after another in their ancestral lands to resist the sudden attacks of these spatial storms. The living environment here was many times harsher than the coastal areas. The clans that could survive here were all extremely tyrannical existences without exception. Naturally, they had many means to deal with these spatial storms. The arrangement of these spirit arrays was no doubt a little inferior to the masters of spirit arrays, but compared to ordinary people, it was much better. Moreover, everyone could feel the aura of some emperor-level life forms from these array formations. Many clans had emperor-level life forms in charge, or had emperor-level life forms in charge in the past. Everyone looked dignified. However, it only took a while before Denda said, "The spatial storms here are too big. Spatial storms of this level aren't too big when we enter the water. I'm afraid they won't affect us in the water. I've seen a terrifying spatial storm once. It covered the sky and the earth. Even if you hid in the deep sea, You would be blown away by this kind of spatial storm and be completely shredded to death. Even though everyone was a sovereign emperor, they were still shocked when they heard about a spatial storm of this level. Almost in the next moment, everyone used the water-repelling art and rushed down. The moment Yi Shiwen entered the water, he discovered that this water was not ordinary water. It was hundreds of times heavier than ordinary water. It was not an environment that ordinary creatures could survive in. No wonder even the spatial storms couldn't blow it away. Those that could survive here were all extremely ferocious creatures without exception. However, this water didn't have any effect on these sovereign emperors. In fact, they were like fish in water when they used the water attribute laws. They flew all the way forward. In the water, there was no doubt that there were far fewer ferocious beasts, unlike on the surface of the sea, where ferocious beasts could be found almost everywhere. This was because it was much more difficult to survive here than on the surface of the sea. However, once there were living creatures, they were all very powerful. Even quasi-emperor level existences were not considered to be rare, and were almost very common. After flying for who knew how many miles, a huge world suddenly appeared in front of them. Yes, a huge world. It was so huge that the entire sea realm was separated from this world. And in this world, there were giant pythons entrenched in this world. Each of them was hundreds of feet long, and some were even thousands of feet long. They looked like giant pythons, but they had a pair of wings on their ribs. Their entire bodies were surrounded by jet black scales. When entrenched, they looked like small mountains. Their world was pitch black, and only some faint light could be seen. However, for many sovereign emperors, even the absence of light didn't affect their vision in the darkness. Yi Shiwen could feel from afar that countless laws were intertwining, forming a huge domain. It formed a huge canopy that covered the entire world. This was the fundamental reason why this world could exist. Ominous sky-devouring pythons. Kan Lao slowly uttered these 4 words. This was the ancestral land of the ominous sky-devouring pythons. Yi Shiwen frowned slightly. He could feel that these ominous sky-devouring pythons were very terrifying. An adult ominous sky-devouring python was almost comparable to the divine king realm. The strength of the best among them was probably no less than the quasi-emperor realm. This race was undoubtedly tyrannical to the extreme. It was no wonder that an invincible ancestor who was comparable to a 9th realm expert had appeared in this race. However, these emperor-level creatures didn't cultivate the laws and didn't ask about the heavenly Tao. No matter how powerful they would eventually die. This was something that even ordinary deities among cultivators couldn't compare to. This could be considered as a kind of fairness of the heavenly Tao. Otherwise, this world wouldn't have been able to accommodate ordinary cultivators like them. Everyone be careful. We must not alarm these ominous sky-devouring pythons if we go in now. Otherwise, this matter will be troublesome, especially if they become vigilant. Who knows how much more difficult it will be for us to succeed? Old Ginseng cautiously reminded everyone. Everyone nodded. They hadn't come here to launch an expedition against the ominous sky-devouring pythons this time. Instead, they had come to secretly seize the non-phase spirit bone left behind by the ancestor of the ominous sky-devouring python race. Nobody wanted to cause unnecessary trouble. They were only one step away. Nobody wanted to waste all their previous efforts. All right, let's go. All of you, come with me. An illusory and strange aura emerged from Lao Shen's body. Then his entire body disappeared in front of everyone. If it weren't for the fact that everyone's divine senses had locked onto each other, they would have immediately disappeared. Everyone unleashed their magical powers and martial arts to conceal their auras. Then, they instantly disappeared into the sea. Even an emperor could deceive the heavenly Tao. So, it was only a matter of concealing some of their auras. Yi Shiwen waited until everyone had concealed themselves. Then he opened his mouth and said, "Before we go, let me go and kill a few ominous sky-devouring pythons. Then, I'll search their souls to find out where their ancestral land is. This way, We won't run around like headless flies. Yes, Martial Emperor is right. Star Emperor and the others nodded. This was indeed the case. Even if Yi Shiwen hadn't mentioned this task, they would have done it themselves. Yi Shiwen flew into this world after he finished speaking. He had just entered this world, and he instantly felt that the world's principles seemed to be rejecting him. There were all kinds of densely packed world's principles that were completely different from the outside world's principles. Unless one was a heaven-devouring ominous python, one would be rejected here. This was also a means that had been arranged by the many old ancestors of the sky-devouring pythons. This was their home field. Outsiders would be weakened here. However, the sky-devouring pythons were the complete opposite. They were like fish in water. Yi Shiwen secretly nodded. This was indeed a means that only an emperor could use. It was a bit like the martial emperor heaven that he had established in the divine court. It also had the same effect. It could block the invasion of foreign enemies. This side of the world had obviously been strengthened by more than one emperor-class life form. However, when it came to the understanding of principles and arrays, these emperor-class life forms were often quite crude. This was because they usually didn't need to use them. As long as they used their innate divine abilities, they would be invincible. Yi Shiwen felt the existence of the world's laws. However, he didn't rush into it immediately. Instead, he began to comprehend it quietly. The mysterious space began to revolve crazily. It began to analyze the composition of this world. Chapter 3047. In front of Yi Shiwen's eyes, countless information poured into his mind like a monstrous torrent. The composition of the entire world soon appeared in Yi Shiwen's mind. It was simply a fantasy for a quasi-emperor to analyze the composition and principles of the laws of a world in a short period of time. However, it was achievable for Yi Shiwen because he was also an emperor and also stood in the same realm. Many things were nothing more than things that could be understood with a little bit of effort. It was not a particularly difficult thing to do. Moreover, with the help of the mysterious space, Yi Shiwen had already analyzed the many rules and principles of this man-made small world in a short period of time. For him, this was simply like a fish in water. This was not a meaningless thing. After analyzing this small world, Yi Shiwen would not be rejected by the entire small world and could freely enter and exit. Although Elder Can and the others could also conceal their auras and enter, they absolutely could not expose their auras. Once their auras were exposed, it would cause the world to reject them and would soon alarm those sky-devouring ominous pythons. Therefore, it was impossible for them to directly attack. It would not take long before the entire sky-devouring ominous python community was alarmed. However, Yi Shiwen would not do that. Even if he directly attacked, the laws of this small world would mistakenly think that he was attacking one of their own. Every one of these ominous pythons was fierce and tyrannical. It was very normal for them to directly kill each other if they did not agree with each other. When the others saw that Yi Shiwen did not directly enter, they were not in a hurry and just waited quietly. After Yi Shiwen completely understood the laws of the entire small world, Yi Shiwen directly rushed into the ancestral land of the ominous pythons. Yi Shiwen concealed his aura and went deep into the ancestral land of the ominous pythons. He could see at a glance that it was hard to tell how many ominous pythons were present in the entire world. And each ominous python was automatically entrenched in a divine country. The entire world seemed ordinary. However, it was hard to tell how many spaces it was in fact. Countless powerful restrictions were fluttering in the air. Each ominous python was in charge of its own territory. From time to time, ominous pythons could be seen returning from hunting outside. Each ominous python's body was entwined with a terrifying and fierce aura. This race was worthy of being called a race that could act like a tyrant in the Stormy Sea region. There were too many experts in this race. They were even more powerful than the average great sect. Yi Shiwen sneaked into the divine kingdom of a quasi-emperor level ominous python on the spot without making a sound. The entire divine kingdom of the fierce python began to seethe the moment Yi Shiwen broke in. That several thousand feet long fierce python woke up with a start. It fiercely raised its mountain-sized head, and its eyes emitted a fierce radiance. Its fangs appeared in its mouth, and it opened its bloody mouth. It seemed as if it wanted to swallow the entire world. "Who are you? How dare you intrude into my kingdom?" At this time, the sky-devouring ominous python had already determined that someone had intruded into its divine kingdom, but it couldn't tell who it was. Yi Shiwen's figure emerged. The Taiyu sword suddenly appeared and chopped down. Whoosh! A terrifying sword chi swept out, as if it was going to pierce through the entire divine kingdom. The terrifying body of that several thousand feet long fierce python was almost immediately split into two halves from head to tail under this sword. His entire body was scorched by the Emperor Lord's law, burning fiercely and turning into ashes. His spirit was also severely injured. He wanted to escape, but Yi Shiwen grabbed him and extracted a part of his memories. Under Yi Shiwen's means, it was impossible for him to escape even if he wanted to. Suddenly, Yi Shiwen understood many things about this fierce python. This was also the reason why Yi Shiwen didn't look for an ordinary fierce python. Its level was too low, and it didn't know much. However, there were too many trivial memories in the memories of this ominous python. Only a few of them were useful to Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen also understood the direction of the tomb of the fierce python clan at this time. The phaseless spirit bone they were looking for was in it. Just when Yi Shiwen planned to return and tell everyone the direction of the tomb, suddenly, a loud roar came from the ancestral land of the fierce python. This roar directly startled the many powerful sky-devouring pythons that were sleeping in this world. Damn it, not good. Someone has alarmed the ominous sky-devouring python. Elderkin immediately felt waves of terrifying intent sweeping through this world. In that case, there's no other way. We can't gather together. Let's all spread out and find a way to sneak into their tomb. Let's do it separately. This way, the chances of success will be much higher. Once we succeed, we'll immediately return to Storm City. Dendik made a prompt decision. They looked at each other and immediately turned into streams of light. They rushed into the ancestral land of the fierce python from different directions. Although they didn't want to alarm the emperor-level existence of the fierce python, it didn't mean that they were afraid. After all, they were all emperor-level characters who dominated a region. They just didn't want to cause unnecessary trouble. However, since someone had already alarmed these powerful fierce pythons, there was no other way. They could only kill their way in. Yi Shiwen narrowed his eyes. A few doubts flashed in his mind. Naturally, this couldn't be caused by him. His attack was straightforward and neat. There was no oversight at all. However, he couldn't care so much at this time. Since he had been discovered, he had to kill his way in. An incomparably powerful, ominous python jumped out of its divine kingdom and discovered Yi Shiwen's existence one after another. These fierce pythons were like arrows that had left the bow. They directly pounced towards Yi Shiwen to kill him. All of you die. Yi Shiwen took a step forward. The Taiyu sword in his hand turned into thousands of sword auras. They directly slashed towards these fierce pythons. Puchi! 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 Yi Shiwen's sword chi directly pierced through these ominous sky-devouring pythons, killing them on the spot. In a situation where Yi Shiwen did not hold back, these ominous sky-devouring pythons were only divine kings, at most quasi-emperors. How could they be his opponents? They were instantly killed. Roar! The fierce pythons that appeared later also suddenly realized that the person in front of them was difficult to deal with. They didn't directly rush up to kill him. On the contrary, they divided themselves into different positions. Then, the formation between heaven and earth seemed to be affected by some kind of power. It instantly took shape. Boom! The moment this formation took shape, a terrible power rushed into the sky. Then, it turned into a terrible energy torrent and blasted in Yi Shiwen's direction. It was actually an Emperor Lord level attack. This place was worthy of being the nest of the fierce pythons. Emperor Lord level formation could be activated at any time. Even for Emperor Lords, it was a certain threat. However, compared to Yi Shiwen, it was still far inferior. These fierce pythons thought that they could use this formation to kill Yi Shiwen. After all, in the past, there were other Emperor-level creatures who dared to spy on their ancestral land. However, as long as these Emperor-Lord-level formation took action, they could be killed. This was probably the extent of the so-called foundation. This was something that rising forces without any foundation could not be compared to. The fierce faces of the fierce pythons revealed a bit of a grin. Then, they only saw that every pore on Yi Shiwen's body was spewing out sword aura. These sword auras formed a terrifying long river of swordsmanship above Yi Shiwen's head. This long river of swordsmanship instantly slashed towards the formation above his head. Boom! The long river of swordsmanship and the energy torrent blasted out by the formation bombarded together. In an instant, the world rumbled and trembled as if it was about to shatter. Both sides were in a stalemate. However, this stalemate only lasted for a moment. The energy of the formation couldn't even withstand a blow from the long river of swordsmanship. It completely collapsed. Then, the long river of swordsmanship directly broke the entire formation. Boom! The entire formation exploded in an instant. The backlash of the formation's collapse was instantly pushed back. Boom! 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 These fierce pythons, who were grinning just now, exploded on the spot. Their spirit was also destroyed under the backlash. The backlash of an Emperor-Lord level formation was naturally at the Emperor-Lord level. They were directly blasted into pieces on the spot. This is big trouble. I must find the cemetery before the battle erupts completely. Yi Shiwen frowned slightly and said to himself. In the memory of the sky-devouring python that he had killed, there was a rough location of the tomb. However, there was no specific location. That was because the sky-devouring python would only go to the tomb when it was old and waiting for death. Before that, it would not even consider going there. Perhaps only an Emperor-class sky-devouring python would know the specific location. Various fighting and explosions sounded in the distance. The others had also directly collided with the fierce pythons. They were different from Yi Shiwen. They were rejected by the rules of this world. In this world, they were like guiding lights, directly attracting the fierce pythons. In particular, Yi Shiwen clearly felt that there was the aura of the Emperor-level fierce pythons rushing over there. Yi Shiwen quickly made a judgment. They might be able to defeat the Emperor-level fierce python. However, it would be very difficult to kill them in a short time. Moreover, the power of the Emperor-level fierce python would be stimulated with the passage of time. Therefore, it would be more difficult to succeed. At this time, they could no longer rely on him. He could only rely on himself. This thought flashed through his mind. Yi Shiwen stepped on the escape light and flew towards the depths of the ancestral land of the fierce pythons. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.